Well, thank you all for coming out today. It's kind of a nice day outside. We're glad you're here and chose to spend part of your time here today. This is a rare and, I don't know, maybe even unprecedented gathering of our town council and our plan commission to consider the consultants that would like to help us in our comprehensive plan. It has been more than 20 years, as many of you know, since we put together a plan last time. And I think that Zionsville has changed significantly. So we wanted to approach this in as open a way as possible, which is why we're doing it in a public forum, which is why we're bringing together our council and plan commission and streaming this online and inviting the public in too. We're joined here today by our Director of Planning and Building, that's Mike Dale down there at the end, Deputy Mayor Kate Swanson. We have the Town Council President Jason Plunkett to my right, Town Council Vice President Brad Burke to my left. We have the Plan Commission President, David Franz, next to him, and then the Plan Commission Vice President, Chris Lake, here as well. So before we get started today with the presentations, let me just go back over what we have done so far, just to get everybody up to speed. We put out a request for qualifications on January 26th. We had 9 responses that were received by February 16th. A committee was formed to narrow those responses down to 3 finalists. That happened on March 1st. And that leads us to today, where the remaining 3 will present as we choose a consultant by the end of this session. So we hope to be done by 4 o'clock this afternoon with that. And after we make the choice, we will negotiate contract terms, form a steering committee, and then carry out the comprehensive planning process from there over the next year to a year and a half. We will be hearing today from the 3 consultants that are planning next, REA and HWC. They will each present for 35 minutes, after which there will be a 15-minute question and answer session. Now, I do want to point out that this is it's a public meeting, but the public is not invited to ask questions or speak. The town council members and the plan commission members will be doing that in the question and answer session. So, as I mentioned, the 3 that are going to be here today, after all 3 presentations occur, we will ask the bidders to leave the room so that we can discuss and hopefully reach consensus on which company is going to lead us through this process. So, as we get started here, Planning Next is going to be the first to present, and I see we have some folks from HWC in the room. I know that the REA folks are upstairs. We're going to ask those who are not presenting to step out of the room, so those that are presenting can have kind of the room to themselves. Thank you. I appreciate it. And as they make their way out, we'll begin with Planning Next to make the first presentation to us today.
Sarah's asking if we need to say the Pledge of Allegiance.
Would you like to say the Pledge of Allegiance? Oh, well, let's say the Pledge of Allegiance. Everybody stand, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Sarah. It's important that we follow the agenda. I did not see that item on the agenda, but thank you. I appreciate that very much. All right, we're going to begin then. 35 minutes for Planning Next. And make sure, please, that the microphone is with you. We are streaming this, and we want to make sure that everybody who's watching out there can hear as well.
Great. Well, thank you all. I appreciate the opportunity to come to Zionsville today. My name is Sarah Bongiorno, and I'm a director with Planning Next. And I'm going to be introducing the rest of my team members in just a second. But I'm personally really excited to be back here in Indiana. I was born in Indiana. I went to school at Ball State, got my architecture degree there before finding my way to planning. I've got a lot of friends and family across the state, and Planning Next has been really fortunate to have worked across Indiana, from Madison all the way up to Valparaiso and many places in between, including here in the Indianapolis region. So we're really excited to be here with you today to talk about the future of Zionsville and a new comprehensive plan. So we have, as the mayor mentioned, we have a proposal overview. We have a technical proposal printout that all of you should have a copy of. We're going to go through that pretty high level. There's more detail in the technical proposal, and we'll have some Q&A at the end. So before we get started, I want to invite my team members here in the room to come up and introduce themselves. We also have somebody joining us via Zoom who will introduce herself in just a second.
Hi, Michael Curtis. I'm a director of Planning Next. I'm really happy to be here with you all. Had about 15 years experience with Planning Next, focusing mostly on comprehensive long-range planning. And so my emphasis here in this project will be providing director-level leadership on land use and the related technical aspects of the plan. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. Yes, afternoon. My name is Isaac Kwan. I'm with a firm called Urban Partners. We're a sub-consultant to Planning Next in the study. We are an economic community development planning agency. We've been working all across the Midwest. Actually, we've been trailing Planning Next, hoping to partner with them in communities like Valparaiso, Dublin, and Fishers, to name a few. So we've been doing a lot of housing and economic studies all across the region. And we'll go into a little bit more about qualifications, but we'll be serving as the economic development consultant for this project.
Great. Thanks, Isaac. And Shannon, your face is not on the screen, but we can hear you, I think. So if you can go ahead and introduce yourself, please, now. Great. Thanks, Shannon. And we've got another face up on the screen there, Emily Hayes. She's a senior planner with Planning Next. She'll be heavily involved in this project as well, providing land use and technical planning support. But I just wanted to acknowledge that folks up on the screen in this room, we're who you'll work with on this project. I will be the day-to-day project manager. And so just, this is us. Okay. Moving on, a few things. I know you have our quals. We're not going to spend that much time on our quals because you've seen that. That's what got us here. But I just wanted to highlight a few things that's really important that you hopefully picked up in our quals, is that for Planning Next, community planning is what we do. This is what we do day in and day out. We're not also specifying tree species or engineering bridges or designing buildings. We're focused solely on community planning. And as a result, we have 10 comprehensive plans in the office just right now, currently, in about 8 different states. And so we can bring all that expertise and experience to Zionsville from across different communities. We've worked in other communities, I think, similar to Zionsville, places we would call high expectation suburbs, high expectation places like Dublin, Ohio, Cary, North Carolina, Davidson, North Carolina, Franklin, Tennessee, Overland Park, Kansas. And so we understand, I think, the aspirations and the high expectations of a place like Zionsville. We also recognize experts in complex and innovative engagement. Engagement's always tricky or a little bit difficult in communities, but it's even harder since the pandemic. There's a lot of different forces at play, and so getting true, authentic engagement from our community processes is really important. We're also skilled at integrating land use, economics, and the transportation component into an integrated plan for the future of Zionsville. And the other thing I will say is that we really like to collaborate. We like to think of ourselves as a shoulder-to-shoulder partner with the community, with the elected officials and staff. We're not the type of consultant that's going to come in and tell you what to do. If that's what you're looking for, probably not it. We are process facilitators. We're interested in facilitating authentic process with the community of Zionsville. And through that process of discovery, we will chart a path forward and we'll put together a solid set of recommendations. I also want you to understand that we're unbiased in this. We see ourselves, our role as the consultant is to be the unbiased, kind of neutral convener in this process on behalf of the larger community. This is our vanity slide. I'm just going to hit on it really quickly. But we are really proud of the fact that our clients and our work is consistently recognized at both the state and national level. Okay, so we're going to get into it here by walking through the scope of work. And the first component we're calling preparation. And we actually put quite a bit of effort and time and thought into the preparation phase. Sometimes you want to just jump right into things and get going, but if you take time to prepare, we found that it really helps lay a solid foundation for engagement and for the technical work. So this preparation phase is all about getting to know you all, Zionsville, and through a number of different things: reviewing existing plans and studies, conducting an orientation workshop and tour, creating the process logo, creating outreach and engagement plans, and then establishing that steering committee and orienting the steering committee. So a number of activities that really get us a good grounding in the work. I want to talk a little bit about the steering committee because that's a really important component for an inclusive project or inclusive process. There's a lot of different, ways they can be structured. We've seen steering committees that are true to their name. They're really steering. We've seen ones that are more like advisory groups. They're sounding boards. We've seen ones that are more focused on process, really helping to extend our engagement, making sure people know it's a choice to get involved. And we had some that split into, based on their expertise and what they bring into the process, some that focus on the technical work through subject matter experts, and others who may focus more on the engagement. So there's a lot of different ways, but this group is instrumental if you want robust, authentic engagement out in the community. The selection for the steering committee is equally important. There's a number of different ways we can do it. There's a nomination process or an application process. I think we found that over the years, an application process really gets a steering committee in place that gets beyond, and I say this affectionately, the usual suspects, the folks that are always serving on boards and commissions and volunteering in the community, and they're great, we need them, but sometimes you want to broaden that civic capacity. So through an application process, you can do that. We're looking for candidates that will be helpful in nature. They're committed. They're really our boots on the ground. They're ambassadors for the whole process. And they're really what allows us to draw in other folks, thinking of networks. They're all connected to other folks within the community. And that's how we start to create that robust engagement process. So with the help of the steering committee in place, we will develop a communication strategy. This is really about spreading the word throughout the community that something's happening, that we're creating a new comprehensive plan for the future of the community. We will develop key messages that will resonate with the community. We'll utilize existing traditional media or electronic media means and really make sure people know it's a choice to want to get involved in this effort. And there's some examples up here of things we've done in other places. One of the first steps in that communications plan is developing a project identity. And so these are some examples, but a unique name for the process. We're not renaming or rebranding the town, just the process. Sometimes that can get confusing, but just the process that will help differentiate it from other initiatives or other organizations or things happening within the community. We can have some fun with this as well. I don't know if you can see the little exclamation point in the Imagine Westerville Community Plan logo, but we had a stencil made of an exclamation point, and we chalked it all over their uptown area to kind of generate some interest. People were seeing these exclamation points and like, what is that? Oh, come to our pop-up event that we're having. So we can have some fun with the process logo. But I will say that everything we've done to date, right, with this developing the logo, creating the communication strategy, really doesn't motivate people to come out and engage with us, whether that's come to a meeting or participate in an online survey. It really comes down to outreach, and that we define that as those personal invitations, the word of mouth marketing. People are 10 times more likely to come out and engage with us through this process if someone they know or trust invites them. That's where the steering committee comes in really strongly here. But we believe in that, developing that civic infrastructure, and we will think about those potentially underrepresented groups as we start, so we can be really intentional and make sure everybody knows it's a choice to come out and engage. And then all of that is really just to get people in the door. Then we have to engage them, right? When we get them to come out to a meeting or a pop-up event or engage with a survey. We believe in engaging at different scales. So whether it's larger scale workshops or smaller scale community conversations, we like it to always be interactive. We are planning 3 rounds of iterative engagement. So the first strategy is usually more generative. It's brainstorming, big ideas, critical questions. We want to really hear from people and hear their ideas. And then we work with that input, incorporating some technical analysis, and then we start framing up some choices or some things that we can then get people to react to. And as you move through the process, it gets more reactive, where we're getting people to provide feedback on what we've developed with their input. And we're checking in with them to say, did we hear you correctly? You told us this in round one. This is how we've moved this along. Did we hear you correctly? And meetings may involve a lot of different formats, and we're going to talk more about that in a second. But gone are the days where you're just like, hey, there's a public meeting at 7 p.m. Be there, be square. To give your input. We really want to layer up different options. So there may be some workshops. There'll probably also be maybe an online survey. We might have meeting in a boxes with our steering committee are doing out in the community. We may attend a pop-up event at a community, another community event where there's already folks gathering together for something. And so layering up all these approaches really gives us that robust approach. Okay, so we're going to dig into the community engagement a little bit further here. I think the most important thing is that we have a philosophy, we had a methodology. As I said, we're very skilled in this. We're known nationally for our engagement, but we're really going to tailor this and work with the steering committee and you all to figure out an approach that's going to work well in Zionsville. We'll facilitate steering committees, we'll facilitate those 3 rounds of engagement, we'll meet with the special interest groups, and we'll make presentations to elected officials and the Plan Commission during this portion of the work. And I was really excited to see in your RFQ that you were interested in engagement that's fun, because I think that's really important. And we've been really, I think, focused on that in a lot of our work for many years. This is actually from College Station, Texas, which was a client of Michael's. And this was actually pre-pandemic, so it's a little more old school because we were using like colored cards for people to yell in their answers. But this was, we developed an approach to presenting existing conditions and trends in the community, which can sometimes be dry and a little hard for people to understand. But we turned it into a trivia game, and people love trivia. So we had a lot of fun. They worked in teams, and they got to learn something about their community. I'm going to see if this will, oops. Let's see if this will play. It's a really quick clip, but just shows how fun people were. That's it. But and now we have live polling software that we use, so people can use their devices if they want, and they can chime in using is a polling platform called Mentimeter that we use. So we've advanced this some. Again, this was from probably 2018, 2019, but we've continued to do this across communities, and it's always a big hit. Okay, and then in your technical proposal on pages 10 and 11, we have a full spread of different engagement techniques. And so you can look through those. We just pulled a few out here as an example, but we're going to really work with the steering committee and staff here to design each round. And again, it'll be a layering of approaches and many different formats probably for each round. In person and online. We really value the in-person connections. Now that we can be back together, during the pandemic we had to pivot a little bit, but now that we're back together, we really prioritize that. But we know that it's hard for everyone to come out, so having that online component also important. And then I'll close with just saying that no matter all of those things we just laid out, and no matter how fun we make it, some people just can't or won't or not able to come out and sort of come to a public meeting or come and engage at a workshop or an event. So we do take some interest in reaching out to those harder to reach groups, and in each community those are different. They may be recent immigrant populations, they may maybe be a section of the community that doesn't feel maybe integrated or connected in with the larger community. It could be an age cohort. In most communities, that 18 to 24-year-old age cohort they're very elusive. And so we work really hard to try to how do we connect in to get that those folks of that age cohort to come out and participate. And so, identifying those, tailoring the communications, really leaning on that steering committee to reach out into the community is one way. One thing I'll also say is that we have what we call some exit questions or an exit questionnaire that we do at all of our events that has just some basic demographic, anonymous basic demographic about the participants. It's really important to us that we understand who comes to the events and that they're representative of the larger community. So we will look at our participants relative to the census data for the entire community of Zionsville so that we can see where our gaps are. So we'll know, hey, we didn't hear from 18 to 24-year-olds, or we didn't hear from this section of the community. What can we do to go out and make sure they're involved? So I know I went through that pretty quickly, but I wanted to make sure we have time to get through some of the technical work as well. Happy to answer questions at the end, but I am going to hand it over to Michael now to talk through some of the existing opportunities and issues section.
So you heard quite a bit about the engagement, and so it's all related. These aren't siloed things. While the engagement's going on, we're doing some technical work and starting to learn about land use, and then working that into our community engagement process. And to us, quality of place matters. It's not just about how land is used and density. It's really about how do developments and buildings manifest themselves in 3 dimensions. What do the places look like? How do buildings relate to each other, relate to the streets, to open space? How does the open space network connected to neighborhoods? How does that relate to the transportation network, the width of streets and things like that? So it's all integrated, and we call that our character-based approach. And it really starts out with thinking about, what do you have today? And starting from kind of your historic core and working outward and really looking at, the different places that exist here in Zionsville and what are the characteristics of those places and what do we want to try to emphasize and maintain in the future, and what are some things that, maybe aren't working as well as they could and should be treated a bit differently in the future. So this is just an example of kind of our initial land use survey, beginning from kind of your core and working out to the edge, the more rural areas. And I imagine the plan would address all of these places a bit differently. So that begins to get us into thinking about the future plan. So beginning from the analysis of what exists today, but I like to think from the very beginning about the outcomes and, starting from the more general to the specific. So we often talk about our plans being organized in these 3 buckets, but not every plan is the same. Not every community is the same. But it often begins with these land use principles where we talk about, these are kind of our statements of intent. What are we trying to do? In the most simple way, is it about, redeveloping certain areas or, reinforcing the existing character in some neighborhoods or in our historic area, or managing growth on the edge of the community, things like that. So that's our land use principles. And then there's often a conceptual map, which would graphically depict what are areas for potential change and what are areas that we want to protect or conserve. And sometimes we call this conceptual map a conservation and development approach because, not everything in the community is going to change or should change in the future. And part of the plan is, figuring that out and talking about, what should we emphasize for conservation and what should we emphasize for development or change. And then there would be a more specific character-based future land use map. And that character-based approach would address things like development patterns and density and intensity of different land uses. It may identify entire districts the same way. Or it may talk about specific uses or corridors in a different way, but it would identify those existing characteristics in terms of buildings, heights, and densities, and open space, and the street network. And what are some of those characteristics that we're trying to develop further and change in the future? We think this approach really sets you up well for potential zoning changes that you might want to consider in the future. And we've had quite a few clients go straight from a planning process like this, creating their land use plan with a very clear character-based intent, and then going straight into a zoning code update. So with that, I want to invite Isaac back up to talk about our economic development approach.
Thanks, Michael. So just to reiterate, we're the economic sub for Planning Next, and as we indicated, we've been working on housing and economic studies all across the Midwest, including Fishers, Dublin, et cetera. But most recently, most relevant to our conversation today is that we were the prime consultant to the County Economic Development Corporation in producing the housing study and the utility study for Boone County. And so it's just finalized 2 days ago, actually. So it's going to be hot off the presses. And one of the key findings, obviously, is the rapid growth of Boone County. So as a Zionsville established town may feel like growth is just kind of bulldozing through your region and through you and around you, et cetera. And that is, in fact, the case. And it's going to continue to be the case in the next 2.5 decades. So the key finding is that it's going to grow rapidly, add a lot of population, needing a lot of housing growth. And if LEAP District indeed becomes and is able to implement its ambitious plan, and it indeed becomes a research triangle park of the Midwest, then it'll add up to 65,000 new residents in the next 2.5 decades. And that's 30,000 housing units in Boone County. And just as a scale, Zionsville is about 11,000 housing units. So you're adding 3 more Zionsvilles in the county. So in light of that kind of dynamic growth happening here and just a corridor that connects from Lafayette to Indianapolis, I think it's becoming a real thing. It is already a real thing. How do you manage that growth? What is your share and how would you like to grow? What's the character of your growth? What's the opportunity? What's the threat? These are the things that we will evaluate as part of our analysis. So yeah, I think our analysis will involve a detailed, as the slide says, a nuanced analysis of the economic landscape, both from a macroeconomic level, but also in a more localized context as well. And so our job, like Sarah mentioned, that it's to come alongside the community and the steering committee and the community at large to develop a plan to guide a balanced growth for you for the next foreseeable future in the next 2 decades. So again, as the slide indicates, our job is to have a deep dive understanding of the economy and the jobs, various trends, opportunities, et cetera, but also take a deeper dive and analysis of how each of these sub-areas, including the village, the South Village, the commercial corridors, and how they fit into the overall economic development. And lastly, the impact of LEAP districts. So it is this big thing, and there's a lot of associated impacts, both in terms of jobs, but also people that may come from all over the country to be employed, but they needing a place to live. What kind of housing do they need? I think these are things that we need to grapple over and have a plan for. Yeah, really looking forward to this. And I think our approach is to do the economic development strategic plan as part of a coordinated approach with the overall comprehensive plan. So this isn't just a one-off addendum to the plan that feels a little disjointed, but it's part of a coordinated approach with the rest of the team. So transportation, land use, and overall vision is in sync with the economic development strategy. And now I'm going to turn it to Shannon, and she'll go over the transportation aspects.
All right, so Shannon, I'm going to be here to help kind of navigate through your slides, but just go ahead when you're ready. Yep.
Yes.
Great. Great. Thanks, Shannon. Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, the transportation network and really a lot of the infrastructure decisions are really tied closely to quality of place and the character of the built environment. So we take that very seriously. We've worked closely with BNN for the last 20 years or so on a number of community plans. So let me talk a little bit about the actual plan development and how this could come together. I think in the an original request, there was some talk about 3 distinct plans, a comprehensive plan, an economic development plan, and a transportation plan. Now, things could be packaged in 3 distinct pieces, or it could be one more cohesive plan, but we can kind of walk you through what those options are. And from my experience, things often change throughout the course of a process, and they sort of evolve. So it's very common that we kind of begin a process with one expectation about what the deliverables look like, but then those sort of evolve over the course of a process. But really trying to understand from you all, like, how does the plan, the comprehensive plan, the economic development plan, and the transportation plan need to be used on a regular basis by staff? And part of that decision comes into how things get organized. And also, we see a lot of places using their plans as marketing pieces to really show other communities, maybe potential developers, potential investors even, what community values and what things it prioritizes. So we can work with you on kind of determining how we package these things, whether it's a series of different plan volumes, whether it's organized by topic or theme, whether it's an online plan as an example. We're doing a lot more of those currently. And then we think one piece, no matter how you actually organize your final plan, is really thinking about how do you get things done, and really setting up a structure for implementation. So as I mentioned, I like to think from the general to the specific. So beginning with your highest level aspirations, your goals, which are, in our view, the desired outcomes expressed in simple terms. And then those goals would be supported by specific actions, either projects or policies, things that you adopt, or programs. Maybe there are things that you fund on a regular basis. And then there would be things to accompany those concepts, including some visual depictions, some renderings, and things like that. And then there would always be an implementation component where we take all those recommendations and work with the staff to assign what is a reasonable time frame for these action items and who are the potential stakeholders that need to be involved in getting these things done, and who needs to be involved, so that over time the plan could be tracked. We recommend, as part of the plan management cycle, and this is kind of a conceptual graphic of how that works, but we imagine that on an annual basis, you're looking at the comprehensive plan, you're looking at how things are being used, what development has come into the community, what are some of the action items that have been done, or what is the status of different things, and doing an annual report. And then using some of that information to help inform your budgeting process and capital improvements planning efforts. So that is part of the plan management, working that into your town processes. And then Sarah, do you want to speak to the overall time frame?
Yes, so this is our last slide, and I think we're almost at time, so that was pretty good. I thought I talked too fast, but maybe I didn't in the early slides. But we've mapped this effort out over about 16 months. And I think what's most important, you have a more detailed Gantt chart in the technical proposal, but I think this just, I think lays out nicely those 3 rounds of engagement as really those milestones with the community. And then the red dots are the steering committee meetings. So they're happening interspersed between those engagements for the steering committee to help us prepare and help us analyze what we hear from those engagements. And then of course the top is a lot of that technical analysis. So if it's not clear so far, the best plans in our opinion are the ones that incorporate really solid technical analysis plus the intuition of the people that live and work and raise a family and make their lives in Zionsville. And so that's what this sort of is depicting there. So with that, we'll wrap it up and open up for Q&A.
Just under 33 minutes. That was very
Yes,
good.
I could have
Very
slowed
good.
down a little bit.
So I want to remind council members and commissioners, if you would like to ask questions, we're going to put you over there by the microphone so people online can hear it. So if you just want to stack up over there, if you have anything that you'd like to ask the folks from Planning Next. I'll go ahead and get us started here. You said, Sarah, in the very beginning that one of your first goals would be to get to know Zionsville. Now,
Yep.
we recognize that you are not located here. You're
Yep.
located out of town.
Yep.
So what's your thoughts on, if you're looking from our point of view, is it better to get somebody who is local, who knows us, or better to get somebody that comes from outside that can give a fresh look to things and not have preconceived notions about what Zionsville is or what it should be?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. And I guess for us, we consider ourselves a national consulting firm. And so while we're located in Columbus, Ohio, we're working in 8 different states. And so I think we really, we do bring that value. We bring that outside perspective. We also bring extensive experience from outside of Indiana and even Ohio, best practice in different places. And so I think, again, we have no stake in the game here. We have no bias. We're really here to be that neutral convener. And so I think that's a differentiator for us, and we're used to coming in. And I'll say that we will never claim to be the expert on Zionsville. That is you all, and we will work with the community here. We are process experts. We're experts in land use and economics and transportation, and we'll bring that technical advice. And that's not to say we won't have opinions or have things that we know, but we really, we'll never claim to be that. We will get smart quick though through researching your existing plans and studies by spending time on the ground here. It's not that far to pop over from Columbus, so we'll be here often. We have the way we manage our projects. You will never wonder, like, what is Planning Next doing? We have this consultant way over in Ohio. We have no idea what they're doing. We have a management way we manage our projects where we will be in touch, weekly coordination calls, monthly trips in for steering committee and engagement. And so I think places we work really value that external, perspective, a fresh look. Sometimes you only know what you know, right? And so I think that's really the value. I don't know, if Michael, you have something else to.
You might add the steering committee's role.
Yes.
Helping to balance that out.
Yeah, the steering committee, you might need to, or I can repeat it. The steering committee, thank you. That's their role, right? They're the experts here in Zionsville. And so we'll rely heavily on them throughout the process and work really closely with them to provide that local expertise, so.
So I've got a question. You talked a little bit about the exit demographics. During our last zoning code attempt at getting that rewritten, there was a lot of input, but the input generally came from a smaller group that was then being translated as representative of the whole. I assume that part of that exit demographic is to ensure that all groups have kind of equal weight to their input.
Yes, exactly. So there's been some communities where we go out that first round and we look at our participant data and our numbers for age and race and geography within the larger community, and it hits pretty close to what the census data is, but a lot of times it doesn't. There are gaps. And so we will work really hard with the steering committee through meeting in a box or some focus groups or do some catch-up work to make sure those folks, because it's really important. We'll never say that we're doing statistically valid surveying. We're not doing that. We're doing qualitative, self-selected input, but representative input really matters, right? We don't want 30 people in the community to be to say that they're representing the larger community. Now, a lot of folks, they ask questions, elected officials such as you are, all want to know, well, how many, what's the number? They're always a numbers game, how many more, and always more is better in some ways, but for us, it's about the representative engagement. So I'd rather have 200 people engaged throughout a process that are representative than 1,000 or 2,000 that are only of one demographic. So,
Great, thank you.
I've got a question. Obviously, the comprehensive plan is something that the Plan Commission refers to as development occurs. The last thing that was done 2003, things have changed significantly. Obviously, rural Zionsville remains predominantly a rural community. I looked through your book, and there's a lot of development that you've worked on, which seems to be bound in a metropolitan area. How many specific communities have you worked that are predominantly rural?
Yeah, we've worked in actually, and maybe that's a little misstep on our part on our quals, but we've worked in a lot. We've done a lot of countywide plans. You'd be hard pressed to find a group like us that have done more countywide plans in Ohio and Indiana. We've worked in Wabash, LaGrange here in Indiana, Clinton County. Help me out, Michael. Ashtabula County, Clark County, Wayne County. So we've done a lot of countywide plans. Chillicothe. So we've worked in some more rural places, and we understand the tension between sort of the preservation of ag and rural land, that rural aesthetic, with the pressures of development for sure. So I think we're well versed in that. Small towns. We've worked in a number of communities that are about the same size as Zionsville and are more within that rural setting. You know, if you want to say anything.
I've been spending a lot of my time recently on countywide plans in Tennessee, in East Tennessee, and it's a lot about preserving rural areas, preserving the historic working farms, preserving view sheds and things like that. So, like in the area around Knoxville, we're doing a plan for Knox County, and it's been 20 years or so since they've had that. They've been facing major growth pressures, and part of it is it's very contentious, but trying to show how we can kind of focus some of the growth pressures that they're seeing in some existing areas, maybe develop those more efficiently in order to preserve other areas that are really treasured. We're doing some of the same thing right now in Chattanooga and Hamilton County, which is going, from the city of Chattanooga downtown, very urban area, all the way out into very remote rural areas.
I got a question. I'm curious to know how you manage your internal iterative process with your subconsultants, with Urban Partners and Burgess and Nyepel. I know you made a good point of how you need to integrate these different various disciplines, but what is the process you're going to use to make sure that each one of these different disciplines, if you will, are communicating with each other and arriving at a final product that's well integrated?
To me, it really begins with land use, and we like to do kind of the land use assessment first, and we do some of the transportation assessment very early on. But in terms of the recommendations, really thinking through what types of places we want to create, and then making sure that the transportation and infrastructure policies follow to reinforce that, because if not, then you're not going to be able to create those types of places. So that's really important. In terms of process, it really happens kind of along the same parallel track. Sarah showed you that timeline. We often do, our beginning analysis and existing conditions kind of in parallel, and then we'll bring them together around the time that we do our second round of public input and trying to get some feedback from the community in terms of, this is some of the things that we're learning, and here are some of the choices we can make and what some of the implications are of those choices. Shannon, I don't know if there's something you want to add to that.
Yeah, and I'll just add really quick that if we're doing our job right, or if I'm doing my job right as the project manager, it will be seamless for you all. That is my job, to make sure we're integrating across our team. And so as we bring deliverables and bring things forward, it should be a very seamless approach for you all.
Okay, we have just a couple more minutes for questions, so any counselors or commissioners, if you have anything, I will invite you over to that microphone where Sarah is right now.
Hey, I'm Sarah. I'm a town councilor. We're the fiscal body of the town, and so I immediately go to page 14 and I flip to the budget and just asking some questions based on your presentation. You said that you know that a lot of plan development evolves over the course of the plan, which is great. I think you have to be that way to be a good consultant, follow the path that the stakeholders are taking you on, or the elected officials are asking you to make sure you have gone to points of contention. And I see things listed out specifically where they fall in categories. So being within budget is obviously very important to the council. I think I can say that for the council. So what happens when it evolves in a way that isn't already lined out here? And then does that affect the expenses you listed? And just because I'm going to get all my questions out at once, I was on the selection committee to get you to this point. And things that drew me through all the other and your qualifications were people that were available for us. And our town is very invested. I've noticed an opening of eyes of our constituents, and they want to have more regular reports. And they don't just want it third party. They want to know from you how you feel things are going. So I just wondered, is that in here where you would come to a town council meeting and maybe give an update, or is it always just going to be through John Stair to us?
Yeah, no, those are good questions. Let me take the first one about the budget. So, we like to think through what it takes, but to Michael's point earlier, projects take on a life of their own. And so a lot of this is tied back to hours and hourly rates and things like that. So to not get into too much detail, there's flexibility built in here, like if we get into something, and we've had this happen multiple times where we get into something and we actually have to have a scope and a budget to get into contract. But we're very flexible to do what's necessary within the parameters. And so sometimes when we get into something, this client might say, a better use of consultant dollars is to have you come and present more to town council. We can take on XYZ that you were going to do to kind of, balance it out, or we're comfortable doing that with some help from you from the side. So some of that happens throughout. There's very rarely, Michael, you can speak to this, there's very rarely a project that just it ticks off just perfectly down the road, right? Because you want some flexibility. But in order to have some roadmap, we put this together. So that would answer one question. And then I guess maybe the second question is we'll be here, as much as we can to present. If that's something that's really important and it's not represented as much, this is a chance. This is our proposed best guess based on what we know thus far. So I think part of the negotiation to get into a contract would be to get through some of those details and expectations and make sure we're aligned. But I think we're confident we can do what we need to do here in the bottom number, I guess is what you were saying. So, yeah.
Okay.
Usually for us, between the kind of interview portion and getting to a contract, is kind of a negotiation of going through line by line in the scope and the budget and making sure that, all these services are the things that you think you were as close as possible at the beginning. And then usually there's some wiggle room to make changes along the way. And one other thing that Sarah didn't mention is that, every month we will be doing project management reports to be showing you what we've done, where we stand in relation to the budget. And, if we do need to make some adjustments in terms of our effort to keep things on track, then we can have those conversations before they become a problem.
I just real quick, as Dave mentioned, obviously the town itself is, heavily agriculture, rural, equestrian. One of the things, Michael, you said was that you guys would work from the historic core out. With the specifics of reinforcing that character as you go through. I guess I'm wondering how nimble this plan is to do both, to consider the rural equestrian, rural agriculture, and the historic district, or the core, I guess, legacy of Zionsville as well. Is it a nimble enough plan to be able to do both of those simultaneously?
Yeah, in terms of the policy recommendations, absolutely. In terms of where we would start in like learning about the place, I mean, you got to start somewhere. And, you know, if you think that we need to maybe start thinking about the more rural areas first, or think about them all kind of as a one cohesive thing, yeah, either way, kind of it's the same outcome. So I was just using that as one example that it would cover the entire gamut from the more urban, the original part of the city to the more rural areas. Really is a way to demonstrate, you know, all of these places are different and may have different needs, different expectations, and the plan should address that. But it's not to say that we start in one place and can't start in another.
Yeah, and I'll also just add that, you know, we're working out in Licking County. I don't know if you guys are paying attention to what's happening in Columbus with Intel coming, but it's a pretty big deal on our east side of just the county next to Franklin County where Columbus is. Lots of growth pressure in a very rural and ag-focused area. And they're understandably trying to figure out, this is all happening very fast, a lot of these small towns. So we, over this past year, facilitate a process with like 15 different jurisdictions to come together to talk about growth and how to be more proactive as Intel comes in so that they're not, things aren't happening to them, right? And so I think in some of that, we've had to balance that and think through for them how to have we'll call it a framework, right? A flexible framework. And so I think, as Michael said, the policies, the things, this document should be a living document. It should be allowed to sort of be what it needs to be. And so that's part of that process of discovery as well.
Okay. All right, we've gone a little over our time for questions, but thank you so much for your presentation. Really appreciate that.
Great.
Thank you for coming here to present to us today, and we will be in touch,
Okay.
as they say.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
You can maybe talk on the way out. We got to keep moving, though, to get the next group in. All right. And we're going to take a quick break here as the new group comes in. The next group will be REA. And they are heading in the room right now, so if anybody wants to take like a 2 or 3 minute break, now would be the time.
I'm going to get snacks. About something.
Yeah. Oh, I'm good. Thank you.
Go hang out.
But that wasn't too. I didn't get it.
Is your intention for Rundle to start at 1 instead of 1:10? Because we had planning next scheduled through 1 o'clock. Okay, so regardless of the time frames we had here.
I was kind of considering those to be.
Okay, got it. Sure, okay. Rundle and
Can you close the door back there? Thank you. Correct. Okay, the next group to present is REA, Rundle Ernstberger Associates, and Tricia McClellan will start. I'm keeping the clock. I'll give you a 5-minute warning when you get close to the end.
Perfect. All right. Are we ready to go?
Please.
Okay. Well, thank you all for having us. We really appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to you and share a little bit more about REA and our team who we've assembled for this project. I've been fortunate to work with the town over the last decade, and you will find our team is truly invested in Zionsville and the outcomes of this plan. We understand that this plan needs to be both bold, innovative, and compelling, as well as organized and user-friendly and approachable. We know you have our scope of work, our qualifications, and even a preliminary engagement plan, so definitely let us know if you have any questions specific to those. But today we're just going to focus on some of the things we've picked up from Zionsville. So our team, we pulled together a team of the best. We've got REA, who we will lead the project, also the land use and engagement. WSP Engineering will lead the transportation planning. VS Engineering will lead utility planning. And AECOM Economics will lead the fiscal and economic development. And then Compass Outreach Solutions for the engagement piece, along with a graphic designer, Shannon Z Creative. So my name is Tricia McClellan. I will be the principal in charge. Sanjay is not with us, with VS is not with us today. He's actually traveling, so he wanted us to share his apologies for that. I'm going to have the team introduce themselves individually, so they'll each come up here and introduce themselves. And I'll start with Cynthia, who's going to be our project manager for the team.
Good afternoon. My name is Cynthia Bowen. I am a partner with Rundell Ernstberger and Associates. I have a little bit over 28 years of experience in working throughout Indiana and in the Midwest, as well as across the country, doing planning, landscape, zoning, and other types of planning. So I'm looking forward to working with you all, and I will talk a little bit more in a few minutes. Will?
I'm Will Wingfield with Compass Outreach Solutions. I'm the only male employee with a certified woman-owned small business. I have 2 decades of communications and public engagement experience, most with the State Department of Transportation and the state's Traffic Safety Office, and I'll be co-leading public engagement with Tricia.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dylan Gilman. I'm a senior analyst with AECOM Economics. We're a national, even global consulting firm, and we were actually the firm that worked with REA just last year, actually, on the Project LEAP analysis for Boone County. And we'll get into a few more details, but mainly I focus on market analysis and economic and fiscal impact.
Hey everyone, my name is Dan Silverman. I lead WSP's planning practice out of the Indianapolis office. I live in Fishers, so nearby with my wife and 3-year-old daughter. Primarily focus on multimodal planning. I guess I'm a generalist transportation planner, have worked throughout the state and throughout the region, the country, on projects scaling and range from intersection safety studies to statewide long-range transportation planning. Thanks.
So as you can see, we've brought together a very broad and very knowledgeable team to bring to you kind of the best to do your comprehensive plan. So let's talk about why this team. Well, first off, as I already said, we bring the best of the best. Strong interdisciplinary team. We have all worked together before in this type of capacity. So we can really focus on the fiscal health, how that plays into and the impact of the land use plan and how the land use and transportation are going to be linked. Because of our long history in Zionsville, and our work in Boone County, we've established a trust amongst the public and the elected officials. And that is really critical when you're doing a comprehensive plan, is earning that trust, especially in today's day and age when you have the public losing trust in their governmental institutions. We bring strong communications and meaningful engagement. We are going to go out and meet the residents where they are so we can incorporate their values and their vision into the comprehensive plan. Because of our long-term engagement with the town, we really can see the potential for Zionsville in the future and the uniqueness of each part of town. We need to understand and know how to plan for the urban, suburban, and rural dichotomy that is in the community. It's going to be critically important. As Dan said, we bring a national perspective and really that linkage between land use and transportation that is critical in terms of your transportation, a multimodal transportation system being able to be supported, the land use development and what that looks like. We believe in an approach, both in a policy and a physical approach, that we are identifying these different characters that are throughout Zionsville, and then making sure that we are harnessing that and pulling that into the policy of the plan. So we're not only providing the design outcome, but we're also providing the policy basis for other things such as your capital improvements plan, your zoning ordinance, your parks plan. So we have had a long commitment to Zionsville, and we will continue our transformational work with you, and we'll continue to accomplish that together. Based on our local knowledge, we've identified a few key areas, a few planning principles that we think may be critical to discuss during this process with you. Managing growth, what does that look like? Where does that growth occur? How does it occur? Economic vitality, making sure there's a diversification within your land uses and how that diversification impacts the fiscal resources of the town. That we have an interconnected community all through Zionsville, West Zionsville, North Zionsville, Southern Zionsville, all throughout. We want to make sure that we're preserving and protecting and identifying each of those vibrant neighborhoods, that we identify what that unique character is, and that we're able to capture that through the land use areas within the comprehensive plan. Identifying and preserving that natural beauty, the exceptional design that we've seen, and making sure any new development or redevelopment is context sensitive to the area around it. So we have looked at other things such as Zionsville creating an exceptional place for people, having higher density towards commercial corridors where the infrastructure, which is there already, can support it. And then making sure we're emphasizing the village and what is happening and how we preserve and protect those areas and the character that has already been established here. So what we've done is we've taken our key issues and started to look at where some of these could go. Some of the interconnected community between West and North Zionsville, protecting some of the and preserving some of the natural beauty and unique features of South Zionsville within Eagle Township. Making sure we're preserving that vibrant downtown. These are all things that we are going to have to do in policies that we will have to look at within the comprehensive plan. We also have to make sure we address the type, the amount, and the location of growth and figure out that diversification and what that means regarding the fiscal health of Zionsville. So our project approach is a 5-phased approach. We go through the discovery phase, whereas we begin to look at other plans that you've done, even things that we've done, and figure out what is the policy in those. What's important now, what's critical to the future vision. We also meet with the public to gauge what they believe are the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats. And we identify what are going to be those major issues that the plan needs to address up front. We then move to the visioning phase, where we begin to set that vision for the next 20 years. What does that look like? What is Zionsville in 20 years? How does it look? And so we begin to look at that both from a wording standpoint, but also a visual standpoint through using characters and images to be able to represent what that growth is, because an image is worth 10,000 words to developers and people looking to come to the community. We will then develop framework plans based on all the key areas that we think are important, whether that be housing, that be commercial and light warehousing, light manufacturing along their corridors. That could be transportation, utilities, historic preservation, quality of life are some of the other key areas that we usually address in frameworks when working with other communities. Then we'll move on to the action phase, where we then prioritize recommendations and develop detailed implementation strategies. And then we move on to the adoption phase. We anticipate that this process will take roughly 16 months for us to do. As you can see there, down at the bottom, we have a lot of community engagement in this process because it's critical for us to be able to understand the values of the residents throughout each part of the process. And so we have 4 public meetings, one in each phase of our process before we get to the adoption. So let me turn it over to Will next, who's going to talk a little bit about community engagement.
Thank you. So how do we make sure that the public is well informed and well engaged in their community plan? It's not just one tool or tactic, it's a multi-pronged, multifaceted approach. Square one is informing the public, building a baseline of trust and expectations about the schedule and what they should expect, and using plain language to do so. What does a community plan include and what does it not? When will we be checking back with updates and continuing the conversation? Why is this important? We'll talk more about formats and tools and tactics in some of the future slides, but keep in mind that this is going to be online and in person. And we want to make sure that the information is consistent across both formats so that everyone feels like they're getting the same information. We'll make sure the process is transparent, equitable, and accessible to all. And we also want to be respectful of people's time. We want to get the information they need, get the information from them that we need, and then let them move on with the rest of their day. So traditional public meetings are an essential tool in any public engagement toolkit. And as mentioned before, we anticipate having one after each round, so 4 in total. They tend to bring out some of the same highly motivated people that attend a lot of public meetings. We want to make sure that we get a richer picture representative of all citizens of the community. It's important to host meetings in all corners of Zionsville. So that means we're talking about Perry Township, West Zionsville, Union Township, North Zionsville. But people lead busy lives. Work, family becomes even more complex as time wears on. I'm a dad to 2 girls, and I feel like I'm quoting Little Mermaid when I say I want to be where the people are. We want to go to these locations where people are already attending events and be present there, to be seen and to host events such as the one that you're seeing here from the Parks Master Plan community conversations. So there's a lot of different opportunities and locations that are listed on your screen. I'm not going to bore you by listing out each one, but as you'll see, there's both in-person and online. We'll talk about that a bit more. We want to build on the existing community resources that are out there. For elected officials, community organizations, social media channels, contact lists. We want to help expand those and use those as our primary communications channels to use what works for this community. I mentioned before, consistent messaging is very important. And we want to make sure that the public has access to the same information, and making some of these events fun. So let's move on a little bit. Trish and I hosted a community walk in Fishers. I forgot to mention during my introduction that I'm a Carmel resident myself. I hope you had a chance to scan through the preliminary engagement plan, and so that we can talk about some of the exercises and workshops that we have planned. We want them to be upbeat, informative, and kind of fun. It's a lot of work, but when you develop an authentic connection with people, you're able to take a concern and turn that into someone who has understanding, and then you're able to get meaningful, actionable public input into the plan. That's what we're going for, and that's what really gets my heart beating. For the preference surveys, you'll see on the top left, residents were indicating what goals and objectives they had to improve quality of life. Some other examples here are thinking big, both with big ideas and big maps on the floor to be able to mark up and show some examples. Live polling is the example here on the lower left, where we decided to go old-fashioned with cards, but we can also use phone-based surveys for live input as well. This is titled Make Your Own Cross-Section, but I don't think everyone knows what a cross-section is. It's basically how do you develop a road that serves all of its users well, not just motorists, but pedestrians and bicycles. And then if we're really truly developing a plan for the future, we want to make sure that we engage all age groups, including the youth. I know the mayor's convened a youth advisory council, and we'd like to engage them in the process and what they'd like to see for their plan in the future. A comprehensive plan is a big deal, and we want to make sure that we get some of the big solutions. Let's talk about some of the more digital tactics that are involved. So the first thing that we want to see are our yard signs going up for the project so that we can point people to the website, both through a QR code. The pandemic and restaurant menus made it really easy for people to use those, but then also the web address on the yard signs as well. We want to pair some of our national best practices on our team with some of the local members that you know and have worked with before. So here on the left are some examples from Hawaii's county zoning and some video shorts that they did to try to explain, again in plain language, some of the complex things that we're trying to accomplish with this comprehensive plan. We've done something similar with the Indianapolis Neighborhood Housing Partnership. The website will include an interactive map that allows you to drop a pin on the map and then give your input. And then you can provide input on other people's comments, provide a thumbs up or a thumbs down. One of the other things that will be important, especially as we move forward to having a draft plan available and adoption, is open houses. And online open houses are important too for document review. One of the tools and tactics that we have here is Conveo. It's what we use for virtual open houses to make it mirror what an in-person open house would be. And to talk briefly about some of those digital tools and tactics that we have at our disposal, I'm going to hand it back over to Cynthia.
Thanks, Will. So we use a variety of digital tools in our engagement with the public, with the steering committee, with the staff. And so here's a list of what we use. I mean, of course, we'll be using traffic modeling software, building upon what the MPO has done. We use GIS as our base foundation for mapping. But as Will said, we use several different platforms for engagement, including Social Pinpoint and Conveo, which allows us to take draft documents and put them on the website, and for the public to go in and immediately identify places within the document and ask questions, and for us to respond to those questions in live time in real field feedback. We also do special transects that will fit the character of Zionsville, and then we do place typologies and design characters to identify, again, what the various character areas are throughout the entirety of Zionsville. We will also do a staff work plan for implementation. So it tells tells the staff how to take the comprehensive plan and incorporate that into their day-to-day life of what they're doing already in their current planning or current economic or current transportation roles. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dylan, who's going to talk about our market and fiscal impact.
Thank you, Cynthia. So certainly community's feedback and involvement is very important to all of this, and our job as part of the team is to balance that along with the cold, hard data that comes along with everything that's been happening in the market here. So it's really taking a look at the market, understanding both the people, the jobs, and the businesses that we expect to come into Zionsville, and to understand how the market meets, or maybe how it is a little bit different from how those demographics are currently showing. So the market absorption piece is really understanding, again, what type of growth, how much growth do we see over this period, and ultimately, as a team, determining, along with your feedback, where that growth is best placed and where it will be most valuable. So as I mentioned before, we were involved in the Project LEAP analysis to understand how much growth there could be across all of Boone County in all of these different uses. So we looked at commercial uses of office and retail, also looking at obviously multifamily and single family housing, to understand really what's the volume that we need to spread across all of Boone County. Now, the focus in this instance will be on Zionsville specifically, and obviously the potential growth from LEAP will need to be taken into account. But however, you all have your own growth that's going on. You have the new Wild Air, you have the farm that's underway currently, and a few others. But certainly looking at, from a high level, how, again, macroeconomic trends interact with the local community, we are seeing that Boone County and Zionsville have been growing very strongly, some of the strongest growth in all of the Indianapolis metro, and understanding how that growth leads to the need for development of additional housing, understanding what kinds of jobs these folks will likely have, and understanding the income levels that play into making sure that new housing that will need to be built is accessible to the folks that will be working those jobs, because ultimately making sure that the type of residential development and other types of commercial development match the demographics that would be coming in is a way to capture a higher proportion of the potential impact. And just showing some of the trends that were identified during our work on LEAP, and also doing some additional prep for this process, is really looking at, as you can see here on this slide, labor force and employment, but also looking at, again, the real estate market. So Boone County and Zionsville have had very strong growth over the past decade, and as you can see, is much faster than the growth in Marion County. Same thing with employment, and also unemployment, as of December of last year, reached pre-pandemic levels of just 1.9%, which is very low, which is a positive indicator, but it also means looking forward that the labor market could be a limiting factor in growth. So making sure that we marry this comprehensive plan of land use along with how to grow the market for additional labor. So again, going back to some outcomes of the LEAP study that we did last year, residential, we really want to make sure that the comprehensive plan that is put forth, again, with your all's feedback, reflects the vision of the community, but again, that is also fiscally responsible. So as you can see here with these 2 charts, what they're essentially telling us is that for residential specifically, additional density and also how new a development is impacts how much fiscal impact or how much property tax production is possible. So as you can see on the chart there on the right, the size of the bubbles tells you how much tax is collected on an annual basis for a particular property. So if you have more density, if you have newer development, that means more money going back to the town. But ultimately, it's a matter of balancing density against the vision for the community. So with that, I will hand it over to Dan to speak about transportation and land use.
Hello again, everyone. So I'll start first by saying that transportation and land use are inherently linked. The decisions that we make now on and for our transportation network have a major impact on the future of where people choose to live and travel to, perceptions of safety in the community, among other things. The REA team is presenting a data-driven but community-based approach to identifying network improvements for all modes, not just, for instance, motor vehicles. The data can tell us a lot of things. It can tell us where crashes are occurring. It can tell us where volumes are exceeding capacity. But ultimately, we're going to be relying on the true experts, who are the community members, residents who live in this town, to tell us, based on their lived experience and their knowledge of the town, what we think we should be trying to accomplish in a transportation and land use plan. Those inputs from the community and from the data that we're reviewing are ultimately going to affect directly the physical and policy recommendations and decisions that come out through the plan. Cynthia mentioned earlier that WSP is kind of nationally recognized as a transportation planning and engineering firm. I think that provides us or puts us in a great opportunity to bring a lot of national best practices to this comprehensive plan specifically. We've done a lot of great work with communities around central Indiana and through the state of Indiana, spanning from this regional example. Here's the Regional Safety Action Plan that we supported the Indy MPO on. We've done statewide long-range plans, corridor studies, all the way down to intersection-specific safety recommendations. Though this plan up on the screen, the Safety Action Plan is a bit of a different scope. It does give us some great experience analyzing safety data in the region. And ultimately, there are a lot of similarities between that sort of work and the work that we'll do to support this comp plan, identifying weaknesses in the transportation network, assessing the needs of both the community and based specifically on the crash data, and then prioritizing a list of specific projects. Priorities representative not only of your community's goals, but of also the goals of the federal administration. Understanding that some of the projects that we put forth, if they are a good match for federal administrative goals, may be more competitive for things like grant funding, and actually get funds to support projects implementation. This other example I mentioned, this is MM 2045 is Michigan's state long-range transportation plan that we supported MDOT with in 2021. It's the first of its kind, synthesizes all modes of transportation into one plan. Obviously much of a different scale, but again, lots of crossover between what was discovered in a plan like this with what we anticipate implementing or supporting the town on in this comp plan. For example, a lot of new trends were identified, like electrification, new mobility, but also several tried and true methods like emphasis on multimodal improvements and right-sizing our roads for the people who should use them. We included this slide up here just to show that WSP and REA, the rest of the REA team, have a great deal of experience working together. We work really well together. This is the Propel US 30 corridor study that we supported NDOT on. Actually, it's an ongoing work. It's poised to have a transformative impact on kind of all of Northeast Indiana, but especially the communities in these 4 counties that are living along this 60-mile segment of US 30. The process here is similar in a lot of ways, again, to what we're going to be supporting the town with if we're so fortunate to. Working directly with the community, analyzing existing conditions, mapping out future trends in the horizon year for transportation capacity, keeping that open line of communication between the steering committee and the community, and ultimately identifying design and policy improvements, changes that will have the most impact on the community.
Okay, in our last few minutes, I'll just kind of touch on one of our similar projects, Connect Franklin and Envision Franklin. Franklin, Tennessee, a community, a mid-sized community down in just south of Nashville, very similar to the Zionsville community in terms of their growth patterns, in terms of kind of their transportation pattern and their network. We worked with AECOM to complete the Connect Franklin update of their transportation plan and did detailed land use analysis, population projections, then to determine what the impact to the roadway network is going to be, and then came up with design cross-sections. In Envision Franklin, instead of going with a traditional land use map, we went with character areas that then defined what the primary and secondary uses were, what the building character was, what that character of that development should be, building placement, looking at height and landscaping. What's the development character that's there now, and what would be pertinent and would fit for the future. The other thing that we will do as part of this process is address critical areas. We know that you have 4 areas: the Village, Street Commercial Corridor, Michigan Road Commercial Corridor, and South Village that you've identified. So we will do an in-depth study of those areas, getting out, looking at the existing buildings, doing a buildings condition, understanding what the land use is on the ground, what the mobility is, and documenting the character, and then coming up with detailed recommendations, detailed plans and graphics of what that can look like in the future, as well as specific development policies for how development should be directed in the future. And so with that, I think we'll stop there and open it up for questions. And if we can have maybe a minute for closing after you get done with questions, that would be great.
Okay. Again, any councilors or commissioners that have questions can line up at the mic there. And as they're going, I'll just say one thing, that you have great familiarity with Zionsville. So I'd like to ask why we should make sure that that's not a negative, that you know us too well, that you're not going to come with a bunch of preconceived notions, that you're going to take a holistic look at what we need going forward.
We think it's the best of both. It's, we know Zionsville, but we bring the national experience. So we can use that knowledge of the town for outreach and getting the word out. Also in helping us, identify some of those preliminary issues and challenges that we're going to be running into. But then we also incorporate the national experience, which brings those best standards and practices, and the latest, and greatest of those standards too. Let's see if you want to add, or is that good? No, that's good.
Craig?
Utility access can affect growth. Can you tell me how utility access ties into the comprehensive plan process?
So VS Engineering will actually lead that charge, but yes, we understand some of the challenges with growth in areas of Zionsville relate directly back to water and sewer. Is there water and sewer there? So as we're looking at land use, as we're looking at transportation, we're also looking at those utilities. We're looking at the cost for those utilities and the strategies for getting those utilities, implemented into the plan. So it really is another important piece because it does guide growth, and has guided growth to where Zionsville is now.
Thank you.
Anybody else with any questions? Sarah, of course.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm a town councilor. I was wondering, on your presentation that we got online, I'm not sure it was through the agenda. I read through it, and one thing that does concern me, just from listening to my constituents and my gut, is that I want to have a group that does a comprehensive plan that is not just fiscally minded as far as the planning goes. And there is a push from a lot of our groups in town have been requesting to be more rural focused and not just on the push for development. And one thing that I read was you had a point of view of fiscal impact of development and how density and physical patterns and fiscal efficiencies could drive part of the comprehensive plan. And I just wanted to share that perspective that we aren't just a town looking for development. We are a town looking for balance between keeping our rural areas rural, but also making sure that we're not just looking at the labor market strains being just constrained to our rural areas for development of housing, because we do have a lot of housing in our neighboring community that does serve that corridor of a lot of the labor markets. So that was one thing I just wanted to share more than ask a question. The question I had was, and I asked the other group this as well, being the fiscal body for the town, we have to look out for the budget. And I saw that your budget was, as far as I was shared, I feel like, did I miss a packet? But this is where I got my information. It was just a small paragraph. And I wondered if you had more information to share on the breakout of the money that was in that. Did I see something wrong, or was
You're
it
right.
just-
We had it summarized in the
Okay.
scope and fee. But yes, as a part of when we're doing contract negotiations, we'll actually go and you'll have your phase plus sub-phases where we break it out into each of those. I guess I'll summarize by saying, we saw the budget that you had and we developed a scope, including, we were very intentional about having a robust community engagement plan. And we are very comfortable with getting you the best plan for the community of Zionsville at the budget that you have given us. Does that
Okay,
answer
because
your
that would
question?
probably, my question would be, how often do you exceed your budgets when you do your consulting work? So you're usually pretty consistent with hitting the numbers that you project?
Yeah, the only instance almost 100% of the time are hitting our budget. Really, the only time it is when the budget is increased. Sometimes a master plan will be added on top of the comprehensive plan, or a particular, just another piece, another scope that wasn't included. That's really the only time. But the budget is what the budget is. The plan is what the plan is.
Okay, thank you.
Does anyone else up here have any questions for REA? Mike?
6 consulting firms working together to produce one plan. How can you explain or elaborate a little bit how you'll make sure that each of the elements and different disciplines you bring to the table are going to be well integrated? That will have a series of policy recommendations that integrate various disciplines that are represented.
So we have a very unique approach when we start a plan. Our entire team has worked together before, and so we work as an extension of the staff. So we work and workshop with the staff, with our full consulting team, to make sure that every perspective is provided so that we're addressing, the rural part and how rural development's going to be. We are addressing the suburban areas of the town and the urban areas of the town. But we'll start with the fiscal and understand the market analysis and where that's going. That will be part of the data. But then through Will and Tricia, we will understand the vision and the values that the community has. That has to play as part of that. So they will be speaking and bringing in that portion of the input. Then we as the planners look at the land use, the population projections, those types of things, and then figure out how that pattern needs to look, where growth needs to go, where growth shouldn't go, and what preservation mechanisms you should have in place to preserve certain areas from growth. And then that's when Dan and his team kind of layer on and layer into with the transportation, and Sanjay with utilities. So then we're understanding the impacts of our land use on these other systems.
I'll chime in with the more organizational part. As principal in charge, I will be your primary point of contact. You will see, Cynthia and I at all of these meetings. You really won't notice the difference between, a team that just had one company versus a team that has multiple companies as a part of that process. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm scanning the room. No one else has questions? Hey, you wanted to wrap up for a minute? You have time.
We're good. So why this team? We'll wrap up very, very quickly. Unparalleled knowledge of Zionsville. Again, we've been fortunate to work in Zionsville. We love working in Zionsville. It's such a great community. 360-degree perspective with strategic land use and transportation, how everything works together and builds upon each other. Established community and stakeholder trust. Understanding that urban, suburban, rural outreach, which you guys have talked about, but also, all the way through the design process and the comprehensive plan. Combining data with that community engagement, always those two together. Experts in traffic planning and engineering, outcome-based decision-making, and then, of course, unmatched policy and design framework. So giving you the plan, giving you the ideas, giving you the vision, giving you the tools that you need to make that vision become a reality.
Okay.
Thank you again.
All right. Well, thank you for coming in today. We sure appreciate your time and your interest, and we will be back to you. Thank you very much. We're moving along at a pretty good clip here. We'll take about a 5-minute break before we bring in the last to present us today. So if you need to get a drink or use a restroom, now would be an excellent time. have a good result at the end, and then get out and enjoy the rest of this beautiful day. So can I ask somebody to close that door back there, please? And we'll hear our third and final presentation from HWC Consultants, or HWC Engineering.
All right. Thanks, everyone. I'm sure, like the others, we're really grateful for the opportunity to be here. I'm grateful for the potential opportunity for our team of HWC and Stantec to work with each of you, and of course with the rest of the town of Zionsville. We've got a great team representing kind of an even larger team that's not here today. And each of us are going to just kind of introduce ourselves along the way throughout our presentation. I'll start. So Jamie Ford Bowers, I am a partner and vice president at HWC. Kind of like I'm sure most of you, I have worn several hats throughout my career and had several different interests. But one of them that has kind of remained the same is my interest here in the town of Zionsville. Having 3 children go through the schools here, I've spent a lot of time and energy in Zionsville. But actually also my very, very first project out of college almost 20 years ago, or actually, that's not fair, over 20 years ago, was Cobblestone Lakes, so not very far from here. And then since then, myself and the rest of our team, we've done several projects from the private sector and public sector within the town of Zionsville, and are excited to hopefully be a part of this next one. Just real quick, firm overview of HWC. We're about 200 people. We're really focused in the state of Indiana. We're obviously, and the reason we're here is we're well known for our planning and economic development expertise, but we offer other services as well. So whether it's land development, which is something that I'm familiar with, or transportation, water, wastewater, et cetera, all of the things that we bring to the table, we certainly will be tapping into as part of the 3 plans that we're here to talk about today. We have teamed up with Stantec. Stantec we have worked with before. We've actually got a couple of other projects that we're working on together as of now. And we've teamed up with them because they are a large, actually international company, over 26,000 of them could call Stantec their place of business, and they really bring sort of a breadth and depth to not just planning and economic development, but other areas as well. And I've got a cheat here because they've got a long name. But they have, so Stantec's North American Urban Places Studio specializes in planning, design, community reinvestment, inclusive engagement, and sustainability to take a really holistic approach to really all the projects they work on, but specifically, we're here to talk about planning. And then lastly, for my portion, we just wanted to give you guys a quick touch on the other planning exercises and projects that we've been involved in and around the town of Zionsville. Kind of similar to the other services that HWC's offers, we kind of look at all of them as really tools in your toolbox, just like our experience in and around the town of Zionsville. Whether it's a thoroughfare plan, a UDO, or a comp plan, or economic development plan, we see our experience in and around the county and the town as a benefit to you. And with that, we are pleased to certainly present our scope, our approach, and moving forward. And Corey Weitzel is going to be the next on the docket here, but we feel really confident that we can do all this effort within your budget that you've allotted. And obviously, we go into a little bit more detail on that in our proposal. But with that, thank you again for having us, and I'll introduce Corey.
Bring us up a little bit from Jamie, but Corey Weitzel with HWC Engineering, really excited to be here today. So I've been at HWC for about 30 years now. And in that time, boy, I started working on projects in Boone County in the late 90s. So all the way back there, had done things and done several things over the years. Today, I serve as a director of planning. More recently in Boone County, been part of several different projects, including the thoroughfare plan, the road safety plan that was done, the airport land use study, Big Four Trail Master Plan, and then more recently the housing study that was just completed. What that means for us is that we have this experience in a lot of different areas. So we start to understand what the challenges and the issues that we're going to encounter when we get into this plan. We're walking into this with our eyes open. We understand what it's like to do public engagement here. We understand what it's like to formulate strategies. We understand how important some of those strategies are to the plan. So let's talk about a few of the challenges we expect to work through in this plan. And we begin with growth as certainly the big one. I'm sure you've heard about this today from the other teams. That housing study we were part of, Adam and I were both part of it, identified an additional 30,000 households being added in Boone County over the next couple of decades. It's a huge amount of population, could more than double the population of the county over time. Some of those forecasts are even higher. The question that is interesting about this, though, is where does this go as a mix in the county, and how much of this comes to Zionsville? You're in just such a unique position because of your quality of place, because of your school system, because of your location. You get to set the tone for where so much of this development occurs, what the mix is that happens here. This is very much development on your terms, not on what a consultant tells you to do, not on what developers tell you to do, not on what IEDC says should happen here, but on your terms. Now, as we've been part of several different plans, one of those plans that we've been part of was the airport area strategic land use plan. That gave us an opportunity to meet with folks that were in Union Township. We met with some of the leaders and some of the residents. And as we sought input on that plan and asked about what is your vision for the future, what do you see development being, no surprise, the most common thing that we heard was we like large lot, single family estate style houses or some sort of farms. And we expect to hear a lot of that same sentiment in many of your growth areas going forward. That's important to understand and recognize that that's out there, but there are unintended consequences of focusing simply on large lot, single family housing. Do you need diversity? Do you need something that would create a more sustainable future for you? All those have to be thought through in this. And so we want to probe at these questions and not just leave it at the surface level, but dig deeper into that. One of the things that came out of that housing study was that you forecasted of that 30,000 additional units, 6,000 or 7,000 of those units might be for seniors. So if you focus purely on single family large lot, where is the place for someone to downsize? Where's the place for retiring families that want a low maintenance situation? What about those folks who are going to be empty nesters and looking for a different type of product? I've got till August till empty nest, so these kind of questions are first on my mind as we work through this. But it's not just from a housing standpoint, it's also how do you diversify your economy? Where are the jobs going to be? Where do we have more commercial centers? Where's the employment going to be? And what is that mix? Chris will talk a little bit later about some of your opportunities to diversify the economy, but all those have to be asked as you're defining what growth looks like on your terms. Certainly mentioned some of the work in Union Township that we did as part of the airport plan, but we've also been involved in other areas, in some of your growth areas. We did the thoroughfare plan for the county. We did the road safety plan for the county, which both covered the rural service territories in Union and Perry Townships, so we understand what those areas, some of the issues they're already experiencing with growth, with traffic, and can certainly figure that into the plan. One last thing to talk about, which is just jurisdictional concerns. And I think this is one that has a lot of challenges related to coordination on this plan. Certainly you look at it on a map and it's a little strange to see the bifurcation of the town. But the real issue is that where the growth is happening is on these fringes between Zionsville and Whitestown and Lebanon. You look at something like Ronald Reagan Parkway, the 267 corridor, and development is snaking in and out of those jurisdictions back and forth. That makes coordination very difficult. And when we're done with that, I think we all want to see that as something that the whole region is proud of instead of a mismatch of different standards coming from different places. We've been part of some coordination efforts through the thoroughfare plan, through the comp plan in Whitestown to be able to bring that closer together, but it's going to take continued effort to make sure that aligns. Jurisdictional issues are especially important related to utility issues. I think about, again, the airport area study. one of the challenges we saw in implementing that plan and really any of the investments you talk about here is where is there going to be sewer to support that? And Union Township, that's HSE territory. Unfortunately, HSE doesn't have any infrastructure there, so there's no way to move that forward. You need a partner in place to support this from a utility standpoint. So we've got to deal with these issues head on, have those coordination conversations, and use that to move this forward. Ultimately, this all informs our approach to the plan, and so I'd like to introduce Adam Pieper, who will be your project manager, and we'll dig a little bit more into the details of that approach. Adam?
Thanks, Corey. So as I said, my name is Adam Pieper. I'm a community planner with HWC Engineering, would be your project manager. So my role is to kind of oversee the comprehensive plan component of this, make sure the three different components are all coordinated, and obviously we're moving forward on track and on schedule. I'm your point of contact, so if at any point in this process you would have a question, comment, concern, please give me a call. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about our kind of nuts and bolts of our approach. We think there's really four things that make a great comprehensive plan. Each of those translate to key outcomes, so that's how we organize our process. One, it has to have a clear vision, right? A unified path forward. That has to be informed and based on what we hear from the community and ultimately what will be supported by them. As we move into forming the plan, that's really translating that broader vision into a series of manageable pieces, goals, objectives, and strategies for the community. And then finally, and most importantly, the practical action steps. So those key next steps, the fiscal plan, how it all gets paid for, and what those priority initiatives need to be. At the end of this, we know the comprehensive plan serves many audiences and a lot of roles. So it is a decision-making tool for elected and appointed leaders like yourself. It's a work plan for staff. There's an education piece for residents, and certainly just a marketing tool for the community as a whole. We know this needs to be done in 18 months. Our kind of philosophy towards timeline is move slow enough that we're building trust through the process, making sure the recommendations are tailored to Zionsville, fast enough that there's no plan fatigue. We're preventing burnout before we're ever done. So in a little more detail, our first phase, cast a vision. This is generally kickoff, organization, data collection and analysis, developing our working relationship through, community engagement plan, communications plan, and ends with a vision workshop and the first steering committee meeting. This phase really is not about trying to answer any questions. The opposite, it's trying to identify what questions we need to answer through the process, the things the plan needs to address to set that stage early. The reach a consensus phase, so this is multifaceted, multi-month engagement process. Building consensus on what the issues are and then starting to identify or build compromise around what some of the solutions can be. It's focused on education throughout, so what are the issues, opportunities, the impacts of different scenarios. So giving the community that information so they can make informed decisions with the help of that data we collected in the first phase. Our philosophy to engagement here is reducing the barrier through a combination of both online and in-person meeting opportunities. And what we think is important for this process, as Corey alluded to, maybe starting with workshops geographically across the town, so in Eagle, in Union, in Perry Township, at least initially. But as we move forward, we know we need to bring all those groups together, the different geographies, so they can hear from each other and don't kind of just continue conversations with only their neighbors or peers maybe that where their views are more closely aligned. It's important that everyone comes together in a meeting and talk to each other. As we form the plan, we're using that data and analysis from the first phase, the community engagement from the second phase, to further articulate that vision and a series of goals and strategies. We're confirming that big initial direction of what we call the Big Ideas Open House. That's also our opportunity to ask any outstanding questions that kind of have a fundamental impact on each of the three components as we would move forward. And really, this is an iterative process, and we think the comp plan, economic development strategy, and thoroughfare plan all need to be developed together. the economic development strategy has to inform the land use plan. Land use plan is needed to assess and do traffic modeling and inform transportation and utility recommendations. So ultimately, all of that gets synthesized and presented at a community strategies open house before we would move into any drafting. So specific to the comprehensive plan is kind of the umbrella over the whole process. Certainly future land use is an important component of this, but as Corey alluded to, the future land use map, it's not just painting with a broad brush. It's how do we mix uses into activity centers? What is the character, scale, context? How do we transition between different areas? That becomes really important and nuanced. Certainly a focus on parks and open space, other quality of life amenities, infrastructure, community services are all important topics. And we know there's going to be some areas as we get into the plan that need a little more detail in terms of land use, connectivity, mobility, open space networks. So we've got 4 focus area plans that will be created as part of the comp plan process. Corey touched on thoroughfare plan. I'm sure if we polled the community right now, maybe some of you all, biggest concerns about potential growth for the future generally come back to traffic, right? So this is an important component. We'll be leading the thoroughfare plan component, but Stantec would be supporting with the transportation modeling and analysis. And again, focus on some really key corridors here and knowing these fringe areas where maybe they're close to development but haven't experienced development yet, but they are experiencing the traffic generated from some of the more recent development. And we see that really as one of the touch points or friction areas between that rural to urban and suburban context that can drive some of the hesitations or concerns about continued development. Key deliverables here are obviously going to be a transportation map, changes to the functional classification system, but then also desired right-of-way characteristics and dimensions, certainly with the different contexts across Zionsville. And then finally, economic development plan. Chris will talk more about this, but we really think the opportunity here is how does Zionsville diversify the employment and tax base going forward into the future. There's going to be LEAP-created opportunities. There's going to be LEAP-created challenges as there's thousands of acres up there, absorbing market demand. Not all of that would be appropriate in Zionsville anyways, but there will certainly be some competition there. And again, Stantec supporting us in that capacity, given their size and kind of scope, they bring some really unique opportunities in terms of data and experiences across the country. And then balancing, again, that data analysis with targeted stakeholder input. Finally, last phase practical action steps, again, detailing the day-to-day actions, the fiscal plan, the key priorities, sharing drafts of all the documents with the community, public presentation, town council and plan commission joint work session, and then additional refinement before we would ever start an adoption process. I think our work across the state, helping communities with various funding opportunities, has really shown the communities that are prepared and have clearly defined priorities in a plan and the projects they want to focus on in a plan are really the ones that are most successful in acquiring additional funding because they're ready when those funding opportunities present themselves. So that is certainly the focus throughout the planning process and detailed in this last phase. In terms of our engagement toolkit, I'm going to go through a variety of examples from some different projects, but these are all things that we are recommending for this. This isn't things we could do. These are things we all think need to happen in Zionsville as part of this. And we tailor different strategies to different purposes. So just in terms of raising awareness at the front end of this process, things as simple as print and digital flyers that can be included in community organization newsletters, school, town newsletters, HOAs, us creating that content for others to share. We've found video to be an incredibly powerful tool, certainly at the onset, clear, easily digestible, several different segments, a 30-second teaser that can be shared via social media, 1 to 2 minute intro, 4 to 5 minute overview. With social media, we'll be creating the content, but then would lean on existing town accounts to push that out. You have a follower base. There's no point in us trying to create a new one. But like I said, we create that content for you. And then again, news media. So getting them engaged early so that they can keep following along in the process and keep updating throughout. So whether it's Current and Zionsville, Lebanon Reporter, If anybody's got WTHR contacts that could help us out, love to get them engaged. You've got an amazing parks and trail system. We're going to leverage that to get the word out. So we're going to make yard signs, get those distributed around the community, timing this perfectly seasonally so people out and about, they can learn about it, scan the QR code, go to the website, get involved. And then pop-up events. So this was the first Friday, but if it's your Saturday farmers market, if it's Trail Fest or some other parks programming, we certainly use them as engagement tools, but again, just a really good opportunity to drive traffic then to our in-person and other, online engagement events. In terms of transparency, everything goes up on the website. Steering committee presentations, steering committee notes, workshop results, draft reports as they're created, certainly draft documents, so those are always available. The website's also used to host those videos, include frequently asked questions, a comment form, so that's a 24/7 conduit to our team. And again, balancing that with in-person. So updates to Plan Commission and Town Council, you already have an interested and engaged audience at those meetings, so presenting there. In terms of the broader input strategies, certainly those community workshops and forums on the front end. Open house style work sessions really allow people to kind of come and go as their schedule allow, and can include fun and different exercises. Duplicating that, so we're trying to get the same information in person as we are online with community survey. In person, a lot of times that means mapping exercises. We're all working around the table on a map. Online, we duplicate that with this interactive mapping tool, so it's like a Google map. You can zoom in and out, put different place markers, make notes, and then subsequent users can thumbs up, thumbs down, and react to that. And then again, steering committee meetings, these are envisioned to be interactive work sessions, not just me standing at a podium talking any more than I need to. And again, just making sure that it is fun and there's unique opportunities for people to get involved, but all of this with the focus on creating meaningful results on the tail end. And then finally, we know that there needs to be some targeted and key times when we reach out to subject matter experts through the process. Again, if it's underrepresented groups here are also really important, HOA groups. So we need to get in the school. So whoever that contact is, get them on the steering committee, or start thinking about that now, because the high school students are a great group to get engaged, bring a great attitude and energy. And ultimately, I think that's why you're doing this plan, is so the young people here now want to stay here or come back after school. So all that's to say, there's multiple levels of engagement, multiple opportunities to get involved long before we would ever be at a public presentation or adoption hearing. And then, finally, before I turn it over to Beth, I just want to say, and the mayor alluded to this at the beginning of today, your current comprehensive plan, I know it's been amended and added to, but it's 20 plus years old. There's 19,000 people that live in Zionsville now that didn't live here when that plan was created, that have not had the opportunity to participate in a long-range process to guide Zionsville's future. That's what excites me. That's what excites our team, and the opportunity to get them engaged and educated about the value of community planning so that they can become the next group of community leaders.
Hi, everybody. I'm Beth Elliott. I'm with Stantec. We are really excited to partner on this project. We've done quite a bit of work in Indiana. What I think that we offer Zionsville is kind of the best practices that we see across the country in comprehensive planning. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about some of Adam's points about how you actually create that meaningful vision for your community and how you use that as a touchstone as you're going through your process. So most of you have something in front of you that I handed out called the 6-word story. So it's not just a gimmick. This is a tool that I use emphatically in every project I do because it is a really tangible way to get your vision for the future of your community. And so we usually print it out like how I gave it to you, and please fill it out. I mean, we might ask you what you said, but we usually will do that half page, and we will string it around, even if it's in a community room, if it's at a pop-up like a farmer's market. And the reason I love this is because people like to be creative. Some people are uncomfortable and feel like they can't write a vision that is just 6 words, but we take this input and sometimes we're able to use people's words directly to write the vision for your community. And it ends up being a really thoughtful exercise, hopefully, but then we also can use quotes in the final plan from the 6-word stories. So if you haven't filled it out, feel free to ignore me and just do that. So in creating an actionable vision, comprehensive planning feels, it feels intangible sometimes, right? Like you're talking about policy. Most people don't know what policy is. The other part of it is that you're putting all these pieces together. Someone might really love housing, but they don't really care that much about transportation. This is our opportunity to put all of these pieces together and speak about comprehensive planning in a way that feels really meaningful for your daily lives. We don't just talk about, you know, what do you want to see in 20 years? This is all the bureaucracy around it. We want to talk about how old are your children going to be in 20 years? Let's talk about, are they going to still be here in Zionsville? What kind of housing will they want to live in? What kind of jobs do they want to do? So we use this as an opportunity, creating a vision to, one, engage all of you and other residents and businesses at key milestones in the project. Adam referred to this, but we want to make sure that if we're going out and talking to you, that it's a pivotal time where your input can have the most impact. And that is a key piece of creating that vision. You need to hold us accountable throughout the entire project in making sure that we are always leading and supporting that vision. We always want to pair facts with input. Adam talked about transparency. It's so important to us that you have information that is informing your input, information on the economy or housing or what is happening with transportation right now. We try to focus on aspirations. This is a forward-thinking endeavor. We want to hear about what's been going wrong, but we want to continually try to pivot to what do you want to see in the future for your own family. And then we try to, again, really focus on being transparent and how your feedback influenced the next phase of the work and the plan direction. So that's how we make a vision less esoteric and more tangible for you. So one example was in a suburb of Dallas called Farmers Branch. It's just north of Dallas. We did, you can see the ladies in that top photo are doing the 6-word story in a community meeting. But what we did was we started off with developing that vision. And then you can see in the upper right-hand corner a photo of us. We went out, when we start to deal with focus areas, which we will do in the Zionsville Comprehensive Plan, we want people to feel what it feels like out in those places. And it was very specific here that we did it at night, because what we did was we walked from a commercial area. We barely made it across the street in the time that the countdown signal was giving us. And then we walked to a nearby residential area. And the whole point was to figure out how that residential area could better benefit from this commercial district. And so that is just one example of how we take that vision and get more detailed and get more detailed and get more detailed. And then it's very hard for you in the audience to see this, but the map down at the bottom, when we talk about land use with the community, again, it can feel like, what does that even mean? How do we tell you what we care about for land uses? So we start by asking you from that vision, what areas could use some transformation? What areas could use some strengthening? What areas should be preserved? But everything in Zionsville we see has a level of care that is necessary in this comprehensive plan. Every part of Zionsville needs some intervention. Sometimes it's just like, let's improve sidewalks or park programming. But we don't say, oh, that area is doing fine, we don't touch it. We're not even gonna study it. We look at everything and then we apply that vision to it. So I'm gonna turn it over to Chris to talk a little bit more about that focus area.
Good afternoon. My name is Chris Ham. I'm the Director of Economic Development with HWC Engineering. I've had the opportunity to do previous economic development planning work in the area, which I think is now referred to as your South Village, more years ago than I would like to admit. on that process, but I understand that Zionsville is an authentic community. I understand that it has a distinct character and a rich history. But there are forces that are beginning to influence this community and will influence this community moving into the future. Some of those include the LEAP district and the dynamic that that will have in Boone County and really more regionally even than that. The tremendous amount of growth, population demand for growth that's impacting the community now and will continue to do so into the future. The increased competition regionally for tourism opportunities. All of these provide this to be the perfect time to be asking, what does success long-term look like for Zionsville now, which is the appropriate time to be doing this process. Zionsville is blessed with several development opportunities inside of it. And you'll see on the map here some of these sub-areas which have been previously referenced on the west side of I-65 and around Indianapolis Executive Airport, certainly the Village and the South Village area, and that area in Union and North Township on the northwest part of Zionsville. Each one of these sub-areas provides different opportunities. Some of them are uniquely available to drive economic growth and provide economic diversity and tax-based diversity into the community, to provide economic sustainability long-term for Zionsville. Some of them are uniquely designed for mixed-use development and mixed-density development to help attract young families and entrepreneurs and young professionals into Zionsville, which will be critically important for long-term sustainability of the community. Some of them provide the opportunity to grow and enhance quality of life opportunities with new opportunities for parks and recreation and trails. But the important thing is that each one of these needs its own vision and its own set of strategies, but that they all collaborate together to drive the overall community vision moving forward. And as part of this, we need to give you some tools as part of this process. So we help build a toolkit and an implementation process as part of this program to help you deliver this. One example of this work was in Noblesville when we recently did their comp plan update. They had a couple of specific areas around their corporate campus and around their downtown where they wanted to drive development in a different direction than the market was taking it as it was moving forward. So we developed design books and development guideline books to help identify and articulate in a visual way what the goals and objectives of the community were in those areas. And then follow that up with practitioner guides, which help staff and developers understand how to actually deliver those goals and objective and vision within those sub areas. And certainly we are planning to do that as well here, as well as provide capital improvements planning and strategic investment planning as part of this to give you the opportunity to make development decisions and, most importantly, to understand the impacts, both community and economic, that will have on your community as a result of those development decisions that move forward. Not many communities have the assets and extraordinary opportunities to be able to cast a bold, dynamic, innovative vision moving forward. Even fewer communities have the leadership and the assets to be able to deliver it. Zionsville is blessed with both. This planning process must be a catalyst so that Zionsville is not just a great place to live, but a great place to work and a great place to play and a great place to thrive. Our team has a proven track record working with our partners, not just to be able to develop a comprehensive plan that allows growth to happen on your terms, as has been previously mentioned, which is critically important, but also to ensure that that ultimate vision that's created as part of your comp plan gets delivered. Because at the end of the day, if you don't deliver it, it doesn't matter. Our comp plans are not designed to be sit on shelves. Our comp plans are to be working tools that are part of everyday decision-making, long-term capital improvement, finance decisions that are made inside of the community, holistic vision on how to drive the community vision and goals to delivery. And that's what we do as part of this process. We're excited for the opportunity to be part of helping this community set its course forward, and we appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Thank you very much for the opportunity. With that, I think Adam's going to come up and help facilitate the Q&A session.
I was going to say, before we would open it up to Q&A, if we do have a minute or two left in our time, I was wondering if anyone wanted to share their 6-word story or just a word or two of their story.
Be brave. It won't be the same.
And that's okay. That's okay. That's why we do this process.
I'll go. walkable historic charm with managed density.
Yeah. Did anybody else touch on those themes?
Zionsville's history will inform its future.
I said unique character with small town feel.
Great.
Idyllic growth for an idyllic town.
Awesome. Okay. Well, again, we just like on behalf of our team, I'd say thank you. I think everyone said, we're certainly excited about this opportunity and would gladly answer any questions you might have.
Well, you are right on the nose with 35 minutes. That's very impressive. I appreciate your proposal and your approach here. Very scientific, very analytical. I think that's great. But sometimes a little emotion's not a bad thing either. So I would ask you, where's the humanity in what you're proposing, and how does it take into account the humanity of Zionsville?
Sure. Yeah. So, and I think that's a very good point. And like I said, it's balancing our quantitative research with the qualitative discussions that we have with the community that many of you just alluded to with those stories. And it's again, we want to use data and our experiences to inform the community, but then ultimately allow them to make the decisions. Because again, this is not my plan. This is not an HWC plan. It absolutely must be a Zionsville plan.
Can I add to that? So, the 6-word story, it might have felt kitschy, but it is the way for us to feel and hear what's authentically Zionsville. And that history, that character is a key piece of it. And so, again, a lot of times what we'll do in community engagement is not ask the scientific questions. We'll give people the information so they can make their own determination, but we'll ask how it applies to their daily lives. How does it apply to their families? How does it apply to their hopes for the future? So, again, I don't want this to sound trite, but we try to do it much more as storytelling and have people learning from each other in the process, because when we go out to like the farmer's market, people don't need to know what a comprehensive plan is necessarily. We just need to ask them the right questions. They're going to inform the work that we're doing. And so we try not to do this bureaucratically. We try to actually have it be very personal. And so that's how we pair that kind of technical, analytical side of things with how people want to live their lives in the future. Are you pointing at me?
Yeah, Beth, thank you. Thank you for being here. Awesome presentation. The one thing I wanted to touch on, Stantec, I'm not very familiar with them. Can you give us some examples of some local or at least Indiana or Midwest-based projects that you've worked on in a similar capacity to what we should expect here in Zionsville?
Yeah, and so Stantec is a huge company, but we're pretty decentralized. So as Jamie said, we have 26,000 people, but I lead all the planners and urban designers in the Midwest. And our team of planners is particularly what I would call, this is wonky, policy planners. We're not the kind of planners who are gonna just draw something, draw a site. We're the ones who know how to take these discussions and make them real for what you see on the ground. And a lot of it is because I spent 14 years in the public sector as a planner. A lot of us have actually done that. I've written comprehensive plans as a city planner and then came to Stantec to do that. But a little bit more about this. Comprehensive plans, you need a bunch of problem solvers at the table with different disciplines and different expertise. You need those transportation people. You need people who understand what's happening with flooding. You need people who understand what's happening with the economy. You need all of these things, and you need all those people to be talking about things together. And that's what Stantec offers this project in particular, is it offers, we can find the experts because we are such a large community development engineering company. We can find the experts. I was one time working with a client, and he said, do you have any like 5G experts? And I said, well, just give me a second. Let me figure it out. We did. We had architects who designed 5G poles, and that's what they needed. But getting to a little bit more of our local experience. So we're working on a waterfront plan in Terre Haute right now. I just finished working with the city of Fort Wayne on updating their downtown design manual and zoning code. We are just completing work on a housing study with the Indianapolis Metropolitan Planning Organization. We partner a lot on comp plans with this group for places like Greenwood. And then we also work on comp plans in small towns, suburban areas, and big cities. Like, that's what we do, and we do it all across the country.
Part of the reason that we've partnered with these guys is because they add tools to the toolkit. So, for example, in Greenwood, the reason we brought these guys in is they have the people that literally wrote the book on how do you retrofit suburban malls into the next generation of development. And so these guys are the #1 experts on that. We brought them in there. Like I said, we're working together in project in Bloomington, project in Terre Haute, and others. This is not a new relationship. This is an established one. But part of the way that I thought we should answer this is also the structure of our team is that we are led by HWC. We're all local. We all are within about 20 minutes of this location and where we live. So we're just down the road. But we've brought in technical experts. So we've got Beth to support on the comp planning to make sure that we've got that extra depth because we're trying to do this in a fast period of time. So we need capacity to do that and do that well. We're bringing Stantec in because they've got transportation modeling experts that can make sure that as we look at the future, we can understand exactly what to anticipate in terms of the traffic problems. But then again, on the economic development standpoint, their team is adding capacity doing that economic analysis to make sure we're looking at national and global trends as it impacts here. So this is an important partnership that keeps the public engagement local. You're going to be working with Adam, me, and Chris on the engagement process throughout this. We're not subbing it out. There's not a communications firm in the middle. We do this because it's important that we get the communications part of this right. We don't trust handing it off to somebody else. We want to make sure it's done right because we've done it here before and we know how it has to be done to be successful.
Sorry, I had to go all the way over here.
You're good.
I'm Sarah. I'm a town councilor. So first off, I was part of the selection team that got you to this point.
Mm-hmm.
And so I paid attention to who you sent qualifications for.
Yep.
And so I've seen some changes. And I just want to know, is this the team that is definitely the team that would work for us? Or do you still anticipate any kind of changes? I don't think, Jamie, I don't think you were on my qualifications packet. Not that that's a bad thing. I enjoyed your speech. I just wanted to point that out. So
Sure.
I'm just questioning that. Is this the team for sure? I always have a lot of questions, so
Yeah.
I have a 3-part question. Number 2 is I didn't see any budget information in your presentation that I received. Did anyone have a
It's in the
back
proposal.
page? No, it wasn't on my computer. I don't know. So I didn't have a chance to see that. I wanted to know if you have any anticipation of if things evolve, if you would need some sort of contingency. Are you within budget? Do you see that being a problem? And then my 3rd question, so that you get them all at once and I don't take all your time. Do you have any availability to come to town council meetings or planning commission meetings? Because we have a very interested constituency that likes to see the people that are doing the actual work so it doesn't become a telephone game showing up. And would that then affect your budget numbers by having to come? I do like that you're only 20 minutes away, so that's good, but still putting that into the consideration of all that. So 3
Sure.
parts. Did you
Okay.
get all 3?
So first one, staffing question. I think, yeah, Jamie maybe wasn't included in the original submittal, but as kind of, vice president and high level, wanted to make the introduction. The only reason she has to get involved in the future is if I've messed up, and I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen.
Okay.
But otherwise, yeah, it is the team that's in there. There obviously were additional people included that either couldn't attend or would just be too many.
Right.
But yeah, like I said, you can expect me to see me at all of the meetings. Rachel Christensen, who's on our team, would be leading the thoroughfare plan component. Kind of how we're organized is Corey's the director of planning and landscape architecture. We have a couple planning teams. So myself manages one of the teams, Rachel manages one of the teams. We have several landscape architecture teams. Chris has his economic development team. So I'm kind of chief cat herder. And then the individual groups below that, because we know this is a big project and a complicated process. So certainly understand the staffing question and concern. But yes, those are the people you can expect to see, and certainly myself, Corey, and Chris. I'm going to jump to your third question in terms of ability to be at Plan Commission and council meetings. Absolutely. Like I said, we're here. I was born and raised in Hamilton County, which is, I know, strike one. Even worse, Carmel, strike two. And now I live in Marion County, which may be strike three, but can be here. We did include a budget in the detailed scope. We are under the budget that you've allocated. Obviously, that scope is what we think it takes to get this process done, but are certainly, would welcome the opportunity to sit down and make any refinements or potential changes to that. I think there's actually, we're below by an amount that would allow additional Plan Commissioner Council updates, work sessions, pop-up events. So happy to do that.
Okay, thank you for answering the question.
Anyone else? Okay, well, you have about 2 minutes. Anything else you want to say, or are we good?
Again, I just say thank you. As a planner, I know this sounds cliche, but these are exactly the type of things that excite me, and again, especially being close and spending time in the area. I'll say if we were selected, my wife would be nervous because it's mean I'm going to spend even more money at the fly shop down the street than I already do. But yeah, just thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
We're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and we'll have the people on the front dais here give some thoughts, and then we'll take a vote and see where we land. Thank you again. And closing the door.
Yeah.
All right, so are we back on the stream? All right, we're back on the stream here, and kind of just take stock of where we are. We've heard from all three of the finalists, the consultants. We've taken notes, we've taken mental notes, and we have had some discussion on what we've heard today. So we have a scoring sheet here, or a ballot, I guess is the best way to say it, for everybody. And what we're going to do eventually is ask you to pick one. Pick your favorite, and we'll tally those votes. We'll see where we are, see if we need a second round. But that's what we're going to do. But before we go ahead and mark those ballots, I'd like to ask the folks up here if they have any thoughts, and also any counselors or commissioners if you have any thoughts that you want to share with the group before we take that ballot. So let's start with Mike and his thoughts now that we've had the three presentations.
As a reminder, I'm not voting. So these are just my thoughts and perspectives. I thought each one of them really did a good job. I think we had a great group of three finalists. Planning Next, being first up, I thought that they brought good energy, will bring good energy to this process. They gave a very good PowerPoint presentation, good information in there. They specialize in planning, so they made a point of saying that we're not an engineering firm, we're not building bridges, we are a planning firm. And that's something that differentiates them from the other two. Two other consulting firms, they have their bases covered with transportation, economic development. They did score the lowest of Department of Public Works, kind of ranked their preferences, and so they were the least favored by the Department of Public Works, but that makes sense because they're not an engineering firm like HWC or even the engineering prowess that REA brings to the table. But I thought that they did a very good job with explaining how they are very community-oriented, community engagement. I think they did a great job talking about how they would interact and communicate with our community. REA, I thought they did a great job in their presentation. I thought that the information that they brought in their presentation, their PowerPoint, probably in my opinion was the strongest. They had the most information in their PowerPoint presentation. Highly qualified group. They are local, which favors well for them. They are familiar with Zionsville. They've done work for and with Zionsville, and they are Department of Public Works' second pick. But I didn't sense as much energy from REA. They were a little bit, kind of a little bit stiffer maybe, but they were very technically oriented. I felt their presentation, they brought a lot of facts to their presentation. HWC, they're the Department of Public Works top pick. They're an engineering firm. They're an engineering firm. It seems that but they brought a very strong partner, Stantec, to their team. Stantec's very well known, very well regarded nationally as a planning firm. They also bring a lot of local expertise, obviously having done work in and around Zionsville and Boone County. Very familiar with transportation issues, very familiar with utilities, township issues, and also very local, both personally and as a company. I thought their PowerPoint presentation, though, was the least informative. They had pictures, nice pictures of, workshops and things, but they compensated for that in their verbal presentation to the group. So I'm not going to say who my top pick is, unless you really want to know, but I wanted to share my perspectives and thoughts on each of those presentations.
Okay.
What do you want to hear from us?
Just some thoughts or comments that you want to share with everybody before we vote?
Okay, I was a little bit surprised coming into this that which one I chose in the end, because I didn't think it would be. I really liked what HWC was saying. I felt like they were talking our language. They had intimate knowledge of real issues facing our town. I agree the PowerPoint maybe wasn't as strong. And even in, I mean, it's not that this matters, but even their presentation early on with their RFP or RFQ wasn't the prettiest presentation, I will have to say, but it seems to me like it had the best information and the things that I wanted to hear.
Yeah, so I think first of all, thanks for putting this on so we all have an opportunity to sit through this. I appreciate all three of the groups. From Planning Next, I like that they did talk about focusing on both rural and urban areas. They were obviously the first ones up and mentioned Leap District, talked about how they could bring South Village into their proposal as well. I do like how both Planning Next and HWC referenced the comprehensive plan as a way for investors into the town to be able to look at that and be a part of the engagement. I don't know when you get to like the implementation, it seems like there's an awful lot that they would put on us, meaning do we really know what we want in a lot of these areas? Because they certainly seem to make it sound like we would be able to drive that, which was good. There wasn't a lot of reference specifically to Zionsville for me in that proposal or that presentation. The next one, REA, I thought was, they're very familiar with Zionsville, obviously. I appreciate their focus on the preservation of neighborhoods and districts. They did use our maps to reference different things. Mike, I didn't think much about this until you mentioned it and you asked them about how they could work with all 6 different groups, right? And I do think, while you're not voting, I do think it's important at some point for us to understand, just because you're going to be engaged with these groups, how you do feel about, working with them. So I don't know if we can circle back to that, but I didn't like the multiple comments about how they kind of take a fiscal approach up front and then steer right into higher density drives. It means more tax base, and that's kind of how and what I took from it. And I obviously, higher density means more multifamily, which I don't know if that's, the direction that, we want to consider. Maybe it is, but HWC, I think that from my perspective, I like that there were just 2 groups. I do appreciate the national, the national perspective with the partner Stantec. Certainly familiar with Boone County. I appreciate that they talk about messaging and leveraging the parks and trails. They did have an awful lot of references to South Village. The website that they talked about, the interactive website, and the holistic use of the plan or vision for the plan. They were the only group that used the word transparency 3 or 4 times, I think. And I do like that as they gather information. This is such an important project that I think it is important that we have a significant amount of transparency. Interestingly, they use tourism in their approach as well, with all the different things that's going on around Boone County and central Indiana, and how we can look to Zionsville as a tourism attraction. So, I mean, I think I would certainly echo the sentiments of Kate. I think that HWC, in my opinion, really stood out, and I do, as I mentioned, Mike, would appreciate understanding your perspective. Obviously, if they're, if Lance appreciates what they do as well, that weighs pretty heavily with me. So.
Thank you, Jason. Okay, Council Vice President Brad Burke.
Yeah, just to echo Jason's note of thanks. Thank you to John and Stair for this entire process, not just today. And Mike, I also had a chance to serve on the small group that got us to this point, and so it's very unique and it's very appreciated that there's been this much engagement and opportunity for us to weigh in. I want to thank everybody for coming out today. I was checking on Facebook, people are watching this, as always, in Zionsville. All 3 were really good today. I think it kind of validated that we were on the right track in terms of getting to the 3 we wanted to present. I thought Next brought their strength, which was their planning expertise. They've got a lot of nationwide experience, almost a little too much. I can't quite get my hands fully around everything that they've done, but I feel like they probably bring some real perspectives, some best practices. I thought your question was a great question of not being the one real local group. How is that a strength as opposed to a weakness? I thought they did a great job with that answer. But we also have two really good local groups I think could do this work. We know them. I think there's a lot of value. Again, I got to hear from our team and Lance in particular, who've worked with both of REA and HWC. So when you're making these decisions, you're kind of like anything else. A referral and working with someone and having a relationship and trust goes a heck of a long way. And so I value that we already know a lot about these businesses, and folks in Zionsville have worked with these companies and they know how good they are and what they bring to the table. So I'm inclined to, all things being considered, to pick a local group that we know. I kind of went in, frankly, thinking REA would be my favorite, just because I also had a chance to sit on that 5-year parks plan group, and I saw how they did their work, but also how receptive they were to what I had to say and other people had to say. They took suggestions to heart and made those. But also, so that was kind of my number one coming in. But HWC did a really, really great job as well. It'd be a tough choice for me between the two, but I think we can't go wrong with either one of those.
Okay. Vice President of the Planning Commission, Chris Lake.
I also thought all three did a great job. Thanks to the committee that made that selection. I think you got us down to three very competent firms. Zionsville is very nuanced in our development desires or lack thereof, in what we want aesthetically in our community. And I feel like not being local is really going to be a challenge. There's a learning curve there that you're not going to get in 1 or 2 or even 3 months of prep. That concerned me a little bit. As an architect that has to do these pitches in town and out of town, I can tell you that out of state's just as great as in state when it suits me. And I just, in this case though, I don't think they can overcome that. HWC and REA both had great presentations. I did feel like this process has to bring energy to people. REA, I felt like fell a little flat in that presentation. And while I've seen their engagement for the town on behalf of some of our groups that are represented here, and I know they can do it, it just left me wanting a little bit more, I think. The challenge I have on the flip side is the graphic deliverable of this plan is going to be so very important. And Kate hit on a little bit of underwhelming experience with what HWC had submitted, and I don't disagree with that. And I think REA would knock that component out of the park. And so regardless of who we select, I think we have to emphasize that is important to us in that final deliverable. And if they can't do it on their own, they best find somebody that can for their fee as part of their team. One thing I really liked about HWC, and this hit at one of the things that Sarah had brought up as a question, they kind of said, hey, we have all this understanding of the numbers, but you have to decide what you want to be. And then we'll apply the numbers to that to pair those up, versus what we saw a little bit more in REA, which was from their AECOM subconsultant that said, here are all the numbers. How are we going to chase them and create that density that lines up with the numbers? And I don't know that we want to do that. And we may, but I don't know that we do. And I felt like HWC's position was a little bit more like, hey, we're going to get all these numbers and they're great. And we're going to do this planning and we're going to get all your input. And then we're going to do this, versus just simply push that density up. So I kind of came out of this feeling like HWC, again, being able to leverage the national experience that Stantec has, probably had the stronger showing and would likely be the best for us in this case.
Okay. And the Planning Commission President, Dave France?
I mean, I actually like the planning next people maybe the best. However, I just think the fact that they're not local is going to be a problem. It's like Chris says, it's a nuanced, very nuanced village. I just think it's going to be imperative that somebody's very familiar with Zionsville, whoever gets this. Of the two other candidates, REA and HWC, I'm not as concerned about the flatness of the presentation. You know, I do think that, again, HWC did do a better job. To me, kind of the things that would flip it towards HWC is kind of their knowledge of the utilities and those sorts of things that just went through they did the airport comprehensive, whatever we called that, airport study. And I don't, you know, again, that's one of the things I don't even know how that was. I can't even remember how that was initiated. I just remember, you know, this is a much better way of doing things, and you know, so I appreciate this, the way this was organized. I will say that HWC, when they came before the Planning Commission, I mean, they fielded and they took, you know, comments and recommendations from the Planning Commission, worked it into the document. They were very receptive on that. I just think the awareness that they have around Zionsville, the fact that, you know, they really mentioned or referenced the adjacent, you know, municipalities and how those are going to interact. I'm going to come down on HWC if I had to pick one.
Yeah. Thank you. So any other counselors or commission members want to share their thoughts?
It's kind of nice going, like, after I hear your opinions, just to kind of see where I align. And it's funny, I align with all of you with what you said, and I think we all actually align in that. I was in the meeting when Lance was like, guys, don't overlook HWC. And he said it multiple times, to the point where we came down to the vote and he said it again. So the people that have to work with who we contract are very important, and I think that maybe get a little bit louder a voice as long as they meet the qualifications that we each individually have. And I think the point about chasing the fiscal to make a plan, it hit with me hard. As far as the presentations, I do think the energy was important. So if you ask me, I'd say 1 or 3 or who I was going for, because they came with their A game. And to me, if they come to their A game here, they're coming to their A game for the whole project. I'm not as worried about local versus not local, just because the list that I saw in Planning Next, they actually really did impress me with Dublin. And I mean, a lot of the places I've been to and I've seen, you know, I assume they're planned after it's been planned. And I think that's something that kind of goes along with saying that I trust Lance's opinion. Like, if you've seen the work that someone's done and you've seen what's come out of it, or you hear from someone who's actually worked with them that is going to be part of our workforce team, I think that's really important. So putting that all together, I would still pick HWC because the weight of Lance's voice is louder, but also it's hitting all the points that we're making, that we want them to consider us as unique. We want them to hear that density is actually important to our constituents. And I like, even though I didn't see it, I don't know how I didn't get the attachment, they are the only ones who came in under budget with a room for contingency. And I think that's important to note, since I'm representing the fiscal body. Consulting firms almost always run into a change or an evolution of what the initial process starts with. So knowing that that's someone who kind of has room to evolve is a great point that I don't think we should overlook.
Evan or Craig, you guys?
I'll just keep it very, very brief. I echo that. I thought all 3 presentations were great. I would really be interested to know, since you're going to be interfacing with them, who your top choice would be. We know Lance, so to the extent that you're willing to do that, I would like to know that. The only thing I wanted to add, and Chris, thank you for touching on the local versus non-local, because I came in here during the presentations thinking Planning Next was the top level. I think that's they're a national firm. They do what they do, and the proof is in the pudding with what you see in Dublin, Ohio, for example. I think there's a lot of similarities that we can draw between Dublin and Zionsville and where Zionsville could be. I think Dublin's a great city, and that really drove kind of, and is still driving kind of my decision, is that I thought REA brings a big team of great consultants with a lot of national presence, but HWC really stood out as the one that really seemed focused and heavy on community engagement. And I know through their pictures, I know their graphics weren't the best, but they definitely were pictures of them out in the community, out doing other things, and that's a super important part of this. So that's just my 2 cents. I felt compelled to ask Mike if, we could at least get your opinion on your ranking or however you want to tell us.
Okay. Sure. When we went through the responses to the RFQ, I scored HWC and REA as 1 and 2, respectively. And even now, I'm torn, between those 2 firms. Okay.
But both of those firms you feel like you could work well with?
Yes. The number of consultants that REA, it would be interesting to me to see how they coordinate the work. And as we talked among staff, how important it is that those 3 or 4 disciplines, transportation, utilities, land use and economic development, are all inform each other. And we come up with a plan that's cohesive. And so having 6 different consulting firms, I would be really interested to see how that worked out. It's a little unusual to see that many firms involved in a project.
Tim?
I don't really have that much more to add. We've all kind of said our piece, but I will tell you, I'm in the people business, and I think people do matter. So I was watching each of the people that were involved very closely, and I think some of the things that broke down with the form-based code had to do with people. Not being great listeners, just not being able to connect with our community. I think this was different. I think this was clearly an indication where HWC rose above the other 2 in terms of their ability to connect with us and hopefully listen to us. So the transparency issue, I agree with you completely, Jace. I think that's going to be an enormous part of this process. John, you've said from the beginning, community engagement is going to drive this entire process. So that's what I was looking for more than anything else. I'm sure they are all very qualified and they all would do a wonderful job, but that was kind of what was driving me.
Mary? No? Jim Hurst? No? Nick? Anybody from the planning? Come on, Nick, you can say something on behalf of the planning commission.
Yeah, I have my opinion about who I think was the best candidate for this role, and clearly it was HWC for me. I think one of the things that I wanted to know, and I just heard from Mike, that was important for me to make a decision was how he felt. He's going to be the one interacting with them, interfacing with them the most, and I think that if he feels like he can have a good working relationship with them, that would be a very important part of my vote. So I think there needs to be a collegial relationship that needs to be productive, and if Mike can accomplish that with HWC, then they're going to have my vote.
Great. Thank you. Cindy?
I really think the same thing.
Can you go to the microphone, please?
I'll have to say my name and where I live, though. I'm really in agreement, too. The only thing I would say if we go with HWC, I was a little, like, that's the best you could do. That kind of concerned me. But if we can bring that to their attention and say, we loved everything you said and what you're going to do, but FYI, when you present, it's got to meet this level. That'd be the only other thing I would say.
And, I'll make a comment in that we hire REA and HWC. They hire us. We work in conjunction with them for clients. HWC right now is doing some great graphics for us on a plan, which is different than presentation graphics and stuff like that. However, it is important in that final deliverable. So I think, if we were to select them, I think we would want to communicate to them that, we're expecting this higher level of graphic deliverable than they may be doing in Lebanon or Whitestown or our other peer communities.
All right, anybody else on the commission or the council have any thoughts they want to share?
John, I was wondering if you could ask Owen and Zach if they have an opinion that they'd like to share with us. No pressure, guys, but if you want to bring something that maybe we haven't touched on yet.
Yeah. Owen and Zach are going to be working very closely with this plan as it develops, so appropriate that you might have some thoughts to share.
I don't think I have anything above and beyond what everyone has kind of already voiced. When I went through the scoring initially, kind of looking at everything holistically and also kind of scrutinizing the economic development portion of it, the two that ultimately rose to the top had good plans. I can work with either of them, and I think they're both going to give us a great product. I think it was great to have Planning Next here because they're out of state. They're here to eat somebody else's lunch, and I thought they brought the air game. I don't think it's a ding against them as far as not being local, but again, I think all three bring a very good product and team.
So I have a couple different thoughts. I've been in the private sector before, so I've worked with a number of these individuals. I liked all three. I will say all three of these were my top picks when we were going through the scoring process initially. So I enjoy that everyone else agreed with me. So I really enjoyed the energy that HWC and Planning Next brought. I thought that was very important because with Zionsville, we need people who are effective communicators and who people are going to respond well to. And we need that high energy. We need somebody to bring that strong voice so that people follow them and run with the vision, whatever that turns out to be. Something that really struck with me was Planning Next was something that they said they wanted to try to meet different people. They wanted to try to get that demographic survey after every single meeting to see who are we missing. Because I know sometimes with any community, you get your really loud speakers and the people that come to every single meeting, and then you miss out of this huge spectrum of people that never show up or don't have the time because of their schedules. So I thought that was something really cool, and I also enjoyed that they have a broad perspective because communities that when you focus on one kind of community or you're always stuck in Indiana, you don't always get that broad perspective and you don't see new things as often. So I think that would be an interesting idea to see someone who has a very broad perspective and sees other communities. I think all three have team members that do bring a variety of perspectives, but I think with the planning lead being outside of our community, it might be interesting, but it would obviously be a budget concern because them driving a couple hours for any in-person meetings could cost us a bit. So HWC and REA would be important to have them as the local community lead. Most of them can drive 10, 20 minutes and they're here. So that's really important to me as well because we can see them quickly. And if something comes up, they can be here at a drop of a hat and it's not a huge problem. Team makeup. I know that HWC and Planning Next, they have the smallest teams, but that's because those firms are so diverse. They have that knowledge built in. So that's why RA, as a smaller firm, has to break out and bring in those other perspectives. Because they are a smaller firm, they need to bring in those other voices that have those specialties that they may not have. Because this is such a complex project, they need that bigger team. I'm trying to think if there was anything else. That's all I got.
Thank you, guys.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? All right. You should have in your hands a ballot.
Are you gonna offer your thoughts?
Sure, I'll offer my thoughts. I'm glad that we seem to be, having a consensus here, and I think that's a wonderful thing. I appreciate all three that presented today too, and I came into it with a concern on local versus somebody from out of town, and I do think that somebody from out of town does have a fresh perspective. I was disappointed in their presentation that they didn't include graphics, they didn't include pictures of Zionsville. And they had 2 weeks to do it. So it seemed very boilerplate to me. So because of that, I have kind of put them in the lower category. So it comes down to REA and HWC. From my time with the Parks Department, I've worked very closely with REA over many years on many projects, including Overly Warman Park and the dog park, the expansion of the rail trail, and the 5-year planning twice. They know us so well. They really do. I mean, it's almost like an insider doing a project that I think should be more outward. So because of that, I would fall to HWC. I think that I like their approach. I think it's holistic. and I think they're not so close to us that they can be objective in their judgments. So that's where I come down on it. So, is that good?
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you for asking. So you have a ballot here. Your names are on the ballot. We would ask you to find your name on the ballot and then click the box that you'd like to click, and then sign your name at the bottom and turn them into Mike. He's going to count them up. Hopefully, for the next few minutes here, we'll have an answer.
I would say real quick while everybody's doing that, John, again, thanks for putting this together, and the team that you guys put together to whittle this down to 3. I know we had a couple council representatives, Councilor Sampson and Councilor Burke, and the other folks that were on that group. I mean, it's certainly impossible for everybody to get together to go through all of these proposals. So thank you guys for all the effort on that too.
Thank you. Got everyone's? Thank you. It'll take a minute or so.
For anybody who's interested, Purdue is going to overtime with Wisconsin.
Paragraphic heavy, yeah, they probably could have done just as good a job as anybody. I just, they have to be able to know. Well, I mean, look at the stuff, they were not local. What did they do?
Is this it? My goodness. All right. We have the results. So we have 2 votes for Planning Next, 1 vote for REA, and 12 for HWC. That obviously is quite the overwhelming number there. And I will point out that the Plan Commission was 7-0 for HWC. To me, that seems pretty definitive. It might be nice to leave here with a consensus. Do you think we should take another round of voting to see if we can reach a consensus on that, or should we go with the vote totals we have?
It's a democracy, and we go with the
Okay. From the government teacher, this is a democracy. We know what the vote is. And that's good enough for me. So thank you all for taking time on a beautiful Saturday to come out and do this. I think it's a really important process, and we're starting off in a very good place with a great deal of public engagement, a great deal of transparency. And I want you to know that and I know Mike too, will do everything we can as this process goes forward to make sure it continues to be as transparent as it can possibly be, because I think this is the defining document for our town for the next 20 years, and I think it's really, really important that we get it right. So thank you again for your efforts. Thank you for all you do. Really do appreciate it. And thanks for those in the public that came too. Appreciate that. Thank you. They might be streaming.